Chapter 11-12. Michael, who was trying to test Lex, was stunned for a moment. He turned around to look at Roland, who was eating happily with a spoon. As the Lord of the Grey Temple, Roland had always presented himself as a strict and authoritative person. Who would have thought that he would start eating in such a situation? Is it really that good? Michael was a little doubtful, but seeing that Rex didn't seem to care about him, he scooped a spoonful of soup and put it into his mouth. Fuck! The meaty aroma of the soup spread crazily in his mouth. At that moment, there were almost no words in his mind that could describe this strong impact. After a moment of amazement, the rich layers of flavors began to show. They overlapped with each other, but didn't disturb each other. The freshness of the ocean, the wild game of the mountains. Everyone couldn't help but be immersed in it. This is too delicious. After swallowing a mouthful of soup, there was only one thought left in Michael's mind. He had never tasted such a delicious soup before. It had completely overturned his understanding of soup. It turned out that one could taste such rich layers of flavors in just a mouthful of soup. It could be so amazing. Vivian would definitely like it too. Also, it seems to be quite nutritious. I'll bring her here next time, Michael thought to himself. The first thing he thought of was still his daughter. After drinking a mouthful of soup, he couldn't help but eat a mouthful of meat. The rich meaty meat was soft but not rotten. It was as if it had been simmered with the best wine in the world. The more he chewed, the more fragrant it became. He almost bit his tongue. Such a delicacy is really rare. It's rare in the world, rare in the world. Michael praised in his heart. He was completely immersed in the taste of Buddha jumps over the wall with every mouthful of soup and meat. Lord Roland, who was at the side, wasn't much different. So the City Lord and the Lord of the Grey Temple are similar to us when they come across good food. Mia sized up the two important figures in her heart carefully. They looked quite down to earth when they were immersed in the food. In the small restaurant, there were 5 10th-tier powerhouses gathered. The City Lord of Chaos City, the Lord of the Grey Temple, the Lord of the Fire, the Lord of Ice, and Rex, the hairless monk who had just escaped from Bowtie prison. Because of a bowl of Buddha jumps over the wall, the 5 of them sat together and ate harmoniously. If they didn't see this scene with their own eyes, they wouldn't believe it. Just like Wesley and the people from Grey Temple outside the restaurant, who were anxiously observing the movements in the restaurant. They were just waiting for an order from inside to prepare to launch a strong attack. Who would have thought that their own city lord and temple master were so engrossed in the delicious Buddha jumps over the wall that they could not extricate themselves from. Ding! Lex's spoon hit the bottom of the bowl and made a soft sound. There was only a thin layer of soup left in the empty bowl. He picked up the bowl and finished the last bit of soup before putting it down. He wiped the sweat off his forehead and seriously said to Mag, "Thank you for your hospitality." 2. Teased to. Crassus and Julian also put down the spoons in their hands. The originally harmonious scene became tense all of a sudden. "I have something to say." Meg coughed softly. He wanted to say something harmonious and friendly. After all, this was his restaurant. If they were to fight here, Amy's would have to prepare for the reconstruction. "Wow! Grandpa Baldy, your hair has grown out." Right at this moment, Amy looked up at Rex and blinked. Then, she pointed at his head in disbelief. Everyone was stunned. Then, their gazes landed on Rex's head uncontrollably. There were really strands of fine hair growing out of that head that was as smooth as a braised egg. It was like the grass that emerged from the soil after the spring rain. It was so short that it could almost be ignored. It was as thin as a baby's hair, and was only a little black. However, this hair was really there. The hairless monk actually has hair. Everyone was stunned for a moment, including Michael and Roland. The hairless monk got his name because he had no hair on his bald head. Ever since he appeared, he had always been hairless. Even after staying in the Bawtai prison for 100 years, he was still bald when he came out. But now, he actually had hair. Shocking. The hairless monk actually grew a head of thick hair after eating in a certain restaurant. This restaurant is probably going to become a great place for young men with hair loss to check in. Meg looked at everyone's expressions. He had already thought of tomorrow's newspaper headline for the newspaper. Could the function of the system's so-called high-level delicacy be to help the greasy middle-aged man get rid of his bald head? Although baldness was indeed quite troublesome, and was basically equivalent to an incurable disease, it was still a high-level recipe that he had painstakingly obtained. Wasn't this a little too hasty? Hair. Lex was stunned after hearing that. He reached out and touched the top of his head gently. The soft touch made him retract his hand as if he had been electrocuted. After a while, he reached out and touched the top of his head again. Although it was only a short layer, it was completely different from the bald feeling in the past. This was the first time he felt hair on the top of his head since he was born. His hand was trembling slightly, and he couldn't help but feel agitated. After he was lucky enough to survive, the biggest difference between him and a normal person was that he didn't have hair. Because of that, he was ridiculed and humiliated. And now, he was going to have hair. If he had hair, then he wouldn't look any different from a normal person, right? After tasting the delicious Buddha jumps over the wall, Lex felt some changes in his state of mind. A small tree seemed to have been planted in his originally empty heart, and now, there seemed to be sunshine again. A rebirth was waiting for him there. Lex looked at Michael and said calmly, "I won't go back to the prison." Michael stood up with his sword and said calmly, "We will bring you back." Roland also held his magic wand. Lex placed his hand on the table, glanced at Roland, and said, "If you must bring me back, I will destroy the entire Bawtai prison. If you release me, I can join Chaos City, and I promise to abide by Chaos City's laws and protect it." Roland and Michael seemed to be in deep thought. Given Lex's power, destroying the Bawtai prison wasn't an insignificant threat. Furthermore, if he were to join Chaos City and become its guardian, it would be even more tempting when the situation of the various races was still unclear. The hairless monk is already dead. He died 100 years ago. Lex stood up and looked at Amy. His stiff face moved, and he revealed a smile. "Now, I am Lex. Lex with hair." With hair, he was that confident. Chapter 11-13. The restaurant was silent for a long time. Only the soft sound of Amy drinking her soup could be heard. Everyone was looking at Michael and Roland. Their decision today might have a long-term impact on Chaos City. A hairless monk who had hair decided to bid farewell to his past and start a new life in Chaos City. Whether to accept him or to stand against him, this question would be decided by the two people in power in Chaos City. If I didn't remember wrongly, what was the name of that bald demon back then? He wasn't a good person either, right? Many human ladies were destroyed in their hands, Crassus said with pursed lips as he stroked his beard. Julian also said in a hoarse voice, "I went to that town called Katorab back then. There were traces of magic wreaking havoc there. The hairless monk doesn't know magic, so I'm afraid it wasn't as simple as a massacre. Exterminating an entire tribe and massacring a city. He is indeed a ferocious person." Meg looked at Rex in surprise. This jailbreaker who successfully alarmed Michael and Roland to take action at the same time had indeed committed a shocking crime 100 years ago. However, judging from Julian and Crassus' behavior, although they saw him as a dangerous target, they weren't too disgusted by what he had done. Instead, they felt a sense of camaraderie between heroes. After all, The two of them had joined forces to exterminate a tribe of ogres back then. Rex looked at the two of them calmly as he waited for their reply. Michael pondered for a while before looking at Roland. Roland nodded slightly before looking at Rex, and said, "I've read through the files regarding your case before. There are indeed some suspicious points. However, you didn't say anything for so many years, so we couldn't investigate. Now, can you tell us what happened in Kotora back then? Did you massacre everyone in the town?" Grandpa bawled, "You have to be honest with Uncle City Lord. He is a good person, and he will definitely help you," Amy said with a serious expression as she looked up. Rex looked up at the ceiling, and his deep gaze gradually deepened. His thoughts seemed to have returned to that small town by the border 100 years ago. "I went to Kotora right after I massacred the Slyless. That day, the sandstorm was very strong. The yellow sand covered the sky and almost completely covered Kotora. Before we even reached Kotora, I could already feel a strong magical aura. Kotora is just an ordinary border town, and there aren't any powerful magicians. Many years ago, I already had the ability to kill the people who persecuted my mother, but I didn't do it. I waited until I was able to kill the great elder of the Sly clan before I started to act. I started by exterminating the Sly demons. However, when I entered Kotora, I discovered that the entire town had been massacred. Everyone was dead, regardless of whether they were adults or children. Even the dogs in the town were all dead. I walked through the streets filled with corpses and found the people who killed my mother in a broken house. They were also dead. My enemies are all dead. I stood in Kotora's square for a day and then left. You should know what happened after that." Lex retracted her gaze. There was still a tinge of sadness in her eyes, but her expression was calm. "In other words, the massacre in Kotora town had nothing to do with you. Then why didn't you mention it to anyone? Even when you were caught, you didn't mention it." Michael looked at Lex in confusion. The incident happened during the racial war. After Kotora town was massacred, it was quickly buried by yellow sand. No one knew what exactly happened back then, but there were witnesses who said with certainty that they saw Lex leaving Kotora town on the day of the incident. Before that, he had just massacred the Sly clan, so this incident was quickly determined to be a revenge massacre. Lex seemed to have acquiesced to this incident, and didn't give any response. Therefore, after the racial war ended, the various races carried out a purge on the numerous notorious villains. The hairless monk, who had slaughtered an entire demon race and massacred a small human town, became one of the villains. He was besieged by the human race and demon race experts, and was finally locked up in the Bowtie prison. "Since my enemies are dead, it doesn't matter to me who killed them. I don't want to explain anything to anyone either," Lex said matter-of-factly. During the trial back then, he didn't say a word. In the end, he was convicted as a tacit admission of guilt. Roland nodded at Michael. Mag, who had remained silent this entire time, suddenly interjected, "In that case, his crime should be the massacre of the Shirley tribe. Considering the crimes that the Shirley tribe committed against the human race, from the perspective of the humans, he should be considered a hero, right? If the Sly clan wasn't massacred by him, we would have massacred them too, right?" Crassus said casually. Julian agreed with Crassus' words, which was a rare occurrence. If that's the case, then Grandpa Baldy was wrongly accused. How pitiful. He lived in a dark place for 100 years, and he didn't even get to eat good food, Amy said as she looked at Lex sympathetically. Everyone was also looking at Lex sympathetically. He had been wrongly accused for 100 years. How pitiful. The original sentence was 200 years of imprisonment. Half of the sentence has already passed. If you really weren't responsible for the massacre of Kotora town, then you only have to take responsibility for the massacre of the Sly clan, and bear half of the sentence. Roland looked at Lex, and extended his right hand. "Congratulations, your imprisonment is over. From now on, you are free again." Lex looked at Roland and hesitated for a moment before reaching out to shake his hand. "Welcome to Chaos City, and become the guardian of Chaos City." Michael also extended his hand to Lex with a smile. Lex looked at Michael and was a little dazed. After a while, he came back to his senses and shook his hand as he excitedly said, "Thank you." The atmosphere in the restaurant became more relaxed all of a sudden. The matter had been resolved perfectly, and there was no need to fight. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief. Amy smiled and said, "That's great. Let's continue eating." "Yes, let's continue eating. The restaurant is about to open for business." Meg glanced at the time and urged them with a smile. Although it seemed like something terrible had just happened, to him, opening for business on time was obviously the most important thing. Everyone sat down again and began to eat. When everyone was almost done eating, Michael took out his money bag and said to Meg, "Mr. Mac, sorry for the trouble. Take a look at how much Roland, Lex, and I have spent. I will give it to you. Don't mention it, City Lord. As a resident of Chaos City, this is what I should do. Forget about the other dishes." 3 bowls of Buddha jumps over the wall cost 30,000 copper coins, Meg said with a smile. Chapter 11:14. Michael, who was taking out his wallet, was stunned. He asked with uncertainty, "How much?" 30,000 copper coins. A bowl of Buddha jumps over the wall costs 10,000 copper coins. Meg smiled as he flipped open the menu. Under the soup column, it was written, "Buddha jumps over the wall, 10,000 copper coins for a bowl, 10,000 copper coins for a bowl." Everyone in the restaurant looked at Meg in disbelief. Although the prices of Mamie's dishes were not low, wasn't it a little too exaggerated to charge 10,000 copper coins for a bowl of soup? Wait a minute. I just drank a bowl of soup that costs 10,000 copper coins. Oh my God. Wouldn't that be more than 100 copper coins? No wonder it smells so good. Every mouthful is filled with the taste of money. Yabamiya licked her lips as she seriously recalled the taste of money. Such delicacies can no longer be measured by money, Rex praised sincerely before saying to Michael, "I'm sorry to have made the city lord spend so much money." The corner of Michael's mouth twitched. People without money were so free and easy with their words. Apart from being delicious, Buddha jumps over the wall also has a very good nourishing effect. The ingredients used are all the best, and the price is fair. Meg was still smiling. The price was indeed fair. After drinking a bowl of Buddha jumps over the wall, he felt a surge of energy in his body. His body that was already at the peak of 8th tier actually had a faint feeling of breaking through. This meant that Buddha jumps over the wall had a very good effect on the knight's training other than promoting hair growth and atavism. Here are 30 dragon coins. Michael took out 30 dragon coins from his wallet and passed them to Meg. Although he was not short of money as the city lord, it was still a little painful to spend 30,000 dragon coins for a meal. After all, Chaos City's funds were a little tight recently. "Roland, I think we should reconsider the tax exemption policy for the food and beverage industry," Michael asked Roland as they walked out of Mamie's. Roland glanced at Rex with a smile and said, "If 30,000 copper coins can be exchanged for a 10th tier powerhouse in Chaos City, I suggest we subsidize this restaurant and waive the management fee." Wesley and the group from Grey Temple were waiting outside the restaurant nervously. They were stunned when they saw the city lord and the temple master walking out of the door while chatting happily with the hairless monk following behind them. The atmosphere was harmonious. Wesley twirled a green chain in his hand. He glanced at Lex and said, "City lord." Michael raised his hand and gestured for Wesley to put down the chain. He smiled and said, "Oh, Wesley, bring Lex to go through the procedures to be released from prison in a while. Then, send someone to assist him to the city lord's office to apply for a resident card. From today onwards, his sentence is over, and he is willing to join Chaos City. I have already agreed to let him join. His sentence is over, and he is going to join Chaos City." Wesley looked at Michael in confusion, and then at Lex, who was standing at the side with his hands tied. This hairless monk, who had escaped from Bawtai prison and was listed as a super felon, was actually announced to be released on the spot after his sentence was over, and he was even allowed to join Chaos City. Wesley felt that his brain couldn't wrap itself around it all of a sudden. "I will tell you the details when we get back. Get them to remove the security and alarm first. Don't affect Mr. Mac's business." Michael didn't explain further. "All right." Wesley nodded upon hearing that. He turned around and told the prison guards to leave. This was obviously the city lord and the temple master's decision. With these two making the decision, there would definitely be no problem. On the other side, Roland also gestured for the Great Temple to remove the security. Very soon, everyone left separately, and Mamie's surroundings returned to normal. What's going on? Why are they leaving just like that? The fight hasn't started yet, right? That goes without saying. The city lord and the temple master are both here. What else can't they suppress? I say, don't tell me the city lord and the temple master went in for a meal. I feel that this time is just right for a meal. The onlookers were curious and a little disappointed. The big scene that everyone expected didn't happen. However, the customers in the queue were overjoyed. They were initially worried that they wouldn't be able to have a meal tonight, but the matter was resolved faster than expected. When the long queue was rearranged in front of Mamie's, it was just the usual opening hours. I heard that a prisoner escaped from prison. It should be that bald hunk who just entered the restaurant. Mr. Mac is really resourceful. How can such a big incident not affect the business? This is probably the charm of good food. There's nothing that good food can't solve. If there is, then it's because there aren't enough dishes. If that's the case, I'm rather curious about what they ate inside just now. Could it be the new, but it jumps over the wall? The customers discussed softly among themselves. The restaurant's door opened, and Crassus and Julian walked out first. Then, Meg walked out, and said with a smile, "There was a small incident just now. Luckily, it didn't affect everyone's meal time. Welcome to Mamie's." "Welcome," Amy said as she clapped her hands and stood beside Meg with Ugly Duckling in her arms. The customers smiled knowingly. Little Boss was still so cute. They started to enter the restaurant one after another. When Harrison walked to the door, he couldn't help but ask curiously, "Mr. Mac, what happened inside just now?" Everyone turned to look at him, their curiosity bursting. "Do you want to know?" "The kind that goes into the courtyard next door," Meg said with a smile. "Well, I'm here to try the new dish." Harrison's expression became serious as he walked into the restaurant with his head held high. Everyone also retracted their gazes. The courtyard next door wasn't a good place. No one wanted to go in just because of curiosity. Oh my God! Am I seeing things? This dish costs 10,000 copper coins. Everyone had just taken their seats when a beautiful elf covered her mouth and exclaimed softly. "Buddha jumps over the wall, 10,000 copper coins for a bowl." The customers all flipped open the menu. When they saw the soup column, they were all shocked. "This bowl is equivalent to 2 months of my salary," a girl mumbled as she swallowed her saliva. One of the ladies mumbled and swallowed her saliva. She could still bring a few of her friends over to try the spicy grilled fish, but this bowl of Buddha jumps over the wall soup was clearly not meant to be shared. The high price still shocked the customers. Although there was no lack of petty bourgeois and nouveau riche among the customers, not everyone was willing to spend 10,000 copper coins on a bowl of soup that no one had tried before. This price was a little too ridiculously high. But it jumps over the wall, is super delicious. That bald grandpa just now jumped over from next door because he smelled the aroma. After drinking it, even his hair grew out, Amy recommended seriously. Give me a bowl of Buddha jumps over the wall. A hurried voice came from the corner. Chapter 11:15. Everyone's gaze followed the voice and landed on the young man in the corner. It was a tall young man who looked to be about 20 years old. He had a high nose bridge, a handsome face, and thick golden hair. He was wearing soft armor that was mixed with gold and silver. There was a long sword beside his hand, and the hilt of the sword was inlaid with a sapphire. He seemed to be a young knight. So handsome. The eyes of the little girl beside him were already filled with stars. A rich, handsome, and powerful man was simply irresistible. Everyone looked curiously at the young man who was the first to decide to try Buddha jumps over the wall. Perhaps he could verify whether this soup was worth the price. Okay, please wait a moment. Meg nodded slightly. He was also a little surprised that the first serving of Buddha jumps over the wall would be ordered so quickly. However, this young man's hair was also quite thick. Why was he so excited when he heard that it could grow hair? Adams retracted his hand and tried to make his expression look indifferent. However, his hand that was tapping on his thigh showed that he was not calm in his heart. He was indeed not calm. When he heard that the bald man had grown hair after eating Buddha jumps over the wall, his heart was in turmoil. Some people looked like ghosts on the surface, but in fact, they did not have a single strand of hair. Unfortunately, Adams was such a person. His family's hereditary baldness had caused him to start losing hair at the age of 14. On his 18th birthday, the last tuft of hair that had been coiled 3 times on his head had finally left him. That day had become his darkest day. At such a young age, he was already under pressure that he should not have been under at his age. Adams was born into a wealthy merchant family. As a second-generation rich man, he was also a gifted knight who had successfully become a third-level knight before he was 18 years old. However, ever since he lost the last tuft of hair, his strength had stagnated, and there was no progress in the past 2 years. He could feel that he was just a little bit away from a breakthrough. However, that thin layer of paper stopped him outside the wall, and he was unable to take even half a step forward. The genius who was once given high hopes had become a joke to others. If he still had hair, he felt that the pressure he had endured in the past 2 years was enough to make him lose another head. Baldness was not an illness, so even the best doctors and magicians could not make his hair grow back. Although this golden wig could make him look bright and beautiful on the surface, it could not make up for the inferiority in his heart and the envy he had for those with lush hair. Moreover, he had a vague premonition that if his hair couldn't grow back, his strength might not improve at all. The 3-year agreement between him and his father was coming to an end tomorrow. If he couldn't break through by then, he would have to go home and inherit his family fortune. Just thinking about it made him shudder. Who could imagine this kind of pain? Lying in the halo of his father, living lazily like a maggot, he couldn't imagine such a life. So when he heard Amy's words, he was so excited that he almost jumped up. There was actually something in this world that could regenerate hair. He could be considered a regular at Mamie's. Half a month ago, he was brought here by a friend to try the grilled fish and beer. Since then, he had developed the habit of settling his 3 meals at Mamie's. He believed the cute little boss's words very much. If it was really effective, let alone 10,000 copper coins, even if it was 100,000 copper coins or 1 million copper coins, he wouldn't even bat an eyelid. 10,000 copper coins for a bowl. It's equivalent to a restaurant's daily profit. Should I try it? Harrison, who was sitting opposite Adams, was in a dilemma. The other customers were waiting curiously for the Buddha jumps over the wall that Adams ordered. Although most of them felt that they wouldn't spend 10,000 copper coins for a bowl of soup, they were still very curious. Meg lifted the lotus leaf, scooped a bowl of Buddha jumps over the wall into a ceramic bowl, and handed it to Yabamiya. Yabamiya carefully carried the tray out of the kitchen. Every step she took was extra careful. It was 10,000 copper coins, after all. She could count every single one of them with her bare hands. The rich aroma of meat wafted into the restaurant. Everyone's eyes lit up. This aroma was exactly the same as the one they smelled before. It was just that it was closer now, and it smelled even more rich. There was the fresh aroma of seafood, as well as the rich aroma of meat. All kinds of aromas were mixed together, but each had its own flavor. It was extremely tempting. Everyone's gaze couldn't help but follow the Buddha jumps over the wall. Your Buddha jumps over the wall. Yabamiya gently placed the black ceramic bowl in front of Adams, and said with a smile. Although she wasn't worried that the delicacies made by her boss wouldn't sell well, she still had a good impression of this customer who was the first to try it. Usually, the opening of a popular dish would start from the first person who tried it. "Thank you," Adams said. His gaze was completely attracted by the Buddha jumps over the wall in front of him. The aroma wafted over along with the heat, went into his nose, and also into his heart. Other than the aroma of various ingredients, there seemed to be a wine aroma as well. It was different from beer and red wine, but that unique wine aroma made people feel intoxicated. There were also many ingredients in the soup. Some were floating, and some were hidden in the thick soup. Every one of them was different. "It smells so good. It's 100 times more delicious than I imagined. I hope it can really make my hair grow back." Adam's eyes were filled with surprise. He immediately picked up the spoon and scooped a spoonful of soup into his mouth. "This taste." Adam's eyes lit up immediately. The rich soup slid into his mouth, and it seemed as if there were dozens of flavors exploding in his mouth at the same time. The taste buds on the tip of his tongue quickly fell into a carnival. He didn't think that he was a person who was sensitive to taste. However, in this mouthful of thick soup, he could taste the flavors of dozens of ingredients. Chicken, abalone, pork tripe. It brought about a rich sense of layering that made people indulge in it. Gulp. After swallowing a mouthful of soup, a slightly numb feeling spread to his limbs and bones. Then, it started to rise from the soles of his feet to the top of his head. He could clearly feel that there were countless ants crawling on his scalp under the wig. It was as if something was going to drill out from his scalp. The numb feeling made him want to tear off the wig and scratch it. What a strong feeling. Could it be that my hair is really going to grow back? Adams was ecstatic. He picked up the spoon and scooped another spoonful of soup into his mouth. The numb feeling on his scalp became clearer and clearer. This feeling wasn't uncomfortable. After getting used to it, it felt as if there was a pair of gentle hands pressing on the top of his head. Moreover, every press was accurately pressed on the most comfortable acupuncture points. It was so comfortable that he almost wanted to cry out. "Pa!" At this moment, Adams suddenly heard a soft sound in his body. Chapter 11:16. This is, Adams was stunned for a moment. He subconsciously checked the situation in his body, and then his eyes gradually widened. He suddenly stood up and exclaimed with a face full of ecstasy, I broke through. His strength that had not improved in the slightest for 4 years had actually just broken through the barrier. He, who had been at the peak of 3rd level for a long time, finally took that step and became a true 4th level knight. His body seemed to be undergoing a reorganization, and his bones made a slight crisp sound. He clenched his fist hard, and a strong feeling of strength came back clearly. It was a feeling of strength that he had never experienced before. Although there was only a difference of 1 level between 3rd level and 4th level, it was the difference between a low-level knight and a high-level knight. Adam's body was trembling slightly. Excitement could no longer describe his feelings at this moment. No one knew how he had spent the past 2 years. Every sleepless night, he would lie in the room that was as splendid as a palace, holding his head that was as big as a stewed egg, and crying bitterly in front of the mirror that was studded with jewels. Not only did he have to guard against the night attacks of those beautiful and plump ladies, he also had to bear the pressure of the 3-year promise. These days were simply unbearable. And now, he had finally broken through. 4th level. He had finally passed the 4th level. He could finally stand in front of his father openly, refuse to inherit those dirty money, and continue to pursue his dream of becoming a great knight. His goal was Alex, that legendary knight. Only by abandoning all distracting thoughts and temptations, and focusing on the great cause of being a knight, could he become a great person like him, right? Yes, it must be like this. Adams thought with certainty in his heart. He had already made up his mind that before he became a great knight, he would definitely not be affected by other things. Mama, what's wrong with that brother? A little girl looked at Adams with some fear. The young woman sitting next to the little girl thought for a while and said, maybe the food that Mr. Mac made was so delicious that he went crazy. Oh. The little girl nodded thoughtfully, and then said with a serious face, then let's not eat that thing. Let's just eat 2 more ice creams. Eating ice creams won't make him go crazy. The other guests also looked at Adams in surprise. This young man looked quite normal, but after drinking a few mouthfuls of soup, how did he get drunk? Adams quickly realized that his reaction seemed to be a little overboard. He blushed and awkwardly retracted his finger that was pointing at the ceiling. He nodded apologetically at everyone before sitting back down and picking up his spoon to continue eating the Buddha jumps over the wall. At this moment, in his heart, this was not just a delicious soup, but a divine medicine that gave him a new life. Before the 3-year promise was up, he had successfully broken through to level 4. Furthermore, he felt that something was emerging from the top of his head. He was 100% sure that it was hair that had been extinct for several years, and it was growing recklessly. A bowl of Buddha jumps over the wall soup had completely changed his fate. He no longer needed to lower his head to fate. What young mistress of equal social status? What money that he could spend in a few lifetimes? These things were not worthy of stopping him from pursuing his dream. Bro, is it really that good? Harrison asked hesitantly as he looked at Adams, who was in tears. Adams raised his head, and vaguely said, this can no longer be described as good. This is my faith for life. If that's the case, then it's really worth giving it a try. Harrison nodded and finally made up his mind. He raised his hand and said, give me a bowl of Buddha jumps over the wall soup, too. I'll have one. I'll have one, too. Then, give us 2 more small bowls. The effect of Adam's tasting was remarkable. It successfully made many customers who were originally hesitating start to order. Adams, who was eating halfway, quickly raised his hand, wanting to order another bowl. He had only eaten half a bowl, and the effect was already so strong. If he could take off his wig and stand in front of his father tomorrow, he would definitely give him an even greater shock. I'm sorry, sir. Because the quantity of Buddha jumps over the wall soup is limited, each person can only order 1 bowl. Mia looked at him and shook her head slightly. I can only order 1 bowl. Adams was a little disappointed. After thinking for a while, he tried again and said, I'll double the price. Can you give me another bowl? I'm sorry, I can't. Mia shook her head. 20,000 copper coins for a bowl was really too tempting. However, the boss had already told her that there were only a dozen or so bowls of Buddha jumps over the wall soup left. In order to let more customers try it, it was necessary to limit the quantity of Buddha jumps over the wall soup. Adams was also a regular customer of Mamie's. He knew the restaurant's rules and Mr. Mac's temper very well. Many beautiful ladies had tried their best to get an extra bowl of tofu pudding, but none of them had succeeded. "All right, thank you." Adams nodded his head slightly in a cultured manner. It seemed like he could only come again tomorrow. After finishing the Buddha jumps over the wall soup, Adams ate another bowl of Yangzhou fried rice. After paying for it, he stood up and left the restaurant. Right now, he just wanted to go home immediately, take off his wig, and see if there was really hair growing on his head. Adams' action of increasing the price by 10,000 copper coins for an extra bowl of Buddha jumps over the wall soup stimulated many customers who were hesitating. Soon, a few more customers ordered the Buddha jumps over the wall soup. "I'm sorry, sir. The Buddha jumps over the wall soup is sold out. Please order again next time." Mia looked at a bald-headed customer and smiled. "Didn't only a dozen people order it? Did you only prepare so little? Can you ask Mr. Mac to make another bowl for me?" That customer looked around and asked in confusion. Mia shook her head and said, "Because it was just released today, we didn't prepare a lot of it. Also, the process of making Buddha jumps over the wall soup is very complicated. It requires several days of meticulous cooking before it can be completed. In the future, we won't be able to release a lot of it every day, so the boss can't make another bowl for you immediately." "I see." That customer nodded his head thoughtfully. Although he was a little disappointed, he still ordered another dish. At the same time, he secretly made up his mind that he would not hesitate again tomorrow. "It's so magical. After eating this Buddha jumps over the wall soup, my strength actually increased. Master said that I wouldn't be able to break through and become a second-tier knight within 10 years. But now, I am already a second-tier knight." A young knight stood up in surprise after finishing a bowl of Buddha jumps over the wall soup. His face was filled with ecstasy. "Mommy, look. Another uncle has gone crazy." The little girl from before sighed. She looked at her mother and said, "Let's just eat ice cream. It's delicious and safe." "That makes sense." The young woman nodded and raised her hand to order 2 more ice creams. Chapter 11:17. I didn't expect this Buddha jumps over the wall to have the effect of increasing a knight's strength. If that's the case, 10,000 copper coins is definitely worth it for a knight. The customers looked at the ecstatic young knight, and suddenly understood why the handsome knight who was the first to try the Buddha jumps over the wall was so excited. He must have also discovered the effect of the Buddha jumps over the wall. "You. Take a look. Has my hair grown out? It's on the top of my head." A middle-aged man with a bald head tugged at his friend sitting beside him excitedly. "Ah! It really grew out." His friend took a glance, and his eyes widened. He stood up from his chair immediately. This childhood friend of his had been losing hair since he was young. He lost all his hair not long after he became an adult. Now, there was only a circle of hair around his head, and the center of his head was as bald as a braised egg. However, the top of his head that had been bald for more than 10 years was now covered with fine hair. Although it looked as translucent as a baby's hair, it was real. "Oh my God!" That middle-aged man covered his face with a dumbfounded expression. After a while, he reached out to touch his head carefully. It was different from the usual bald feeling. Now, there was a furry feeling. How many years had it been? The barren land actually sprouted again. "Mr. Mac, I really don't know how to thank you. You are my second parent." The middle-aged man stood up, and bowed in the direction of the kitchen. He was so excited that he couldn't control himself. Fuck. It actually has the effect of growing hair. The bald burly man who didn't order the Buddha jumps over the wall suddenly stood up and looked at the excited middle-aged man with envy. The customers who were suffering from hair loss also had their eyes lit up. Although 10,000 copper coins wasn't a small amount, if it could solve the problem of hair loss and let hair regrow, they wouldn't feel the pinch even if they had to order a few more bowls. Mond, who was sitting outside the restaurant, touched his bald head and whispered to Sardras, "Boss, should we try a bowl?" Keel and the rest looked at each other's bald heads with an inexplicable look in their eyes. Ever since they could remember, they had forgotten how it felt to have hair. Now that they heard it, they were really tempted. Hair. Ha, it's just a useless worry. Sardras smiled disdainfully as he touched his big bald head, and proudly said, "This is the mark of us lava demons. It's a mark that no one can imitate or surpass." All the demons looked at Sardras, and their pride surged. They even found each other's bald heads much more pleasing to the eye. "Boss, is it because we can't afford it?" Mond whispered. "Can't afford it? Ha!" Sardras smirked disdainfully, and slapped a shriveled purse on the table. With a complicated expression, he said, "We really can't afford it. But do you think it's worth it to pay 50 holy rugiamos for a little hair?" Sardras glanced at the crowd. "Not worth it." All the evil demons shook their heads with firm gazes. Compared to the holy rugiamo, his hair was not even worth mentioning. "What is our goal?" "Let all the demons in the tribe eat rugiamo," the demons said in unison. Sardras took a bite of the rugiamo in his hand, and worriedly said, "The road ahead is long, the road ahead is long." All the demons lowered their heads in shame, and continued to eat their rugiamos. They didn't mention the Buddha jumps over the wall again. "My hair has really grown out." Standing in front of the mirror inlaid with gems, Adams looked at himself in the mirror. Fine hair had grown out of his bald head. His light golden hair was almost transparent, soft, and short. However, in Adam's eyes, it was as if it was emitting a golden light. It was exceptionally bright and dazzling. "It's all grown out. When it grows out, I'll have real hair. This is great." Adam stood in front of the mirror and looked at himself for a long time. He couldn't stop smiling at the mirror. If it wasn't for his rationality, he couldn't wait to announce to the world that he, Adams, finally had hair of his own again. "Now that I have hair again, and my ability has successfully broken through to the 4th tier, I'll definitely give Father a big surprise tomorrow, right?" Adams smiled brightly. The Gould Manor was still brightly lit. The servants were walking back and forth, preparing for the banquet tomorrow. A bald man in a lavish black robe stood on the stage, and loudly said, "Check the banquet's layout again. I've invited most of the big shots in Chaos City tomorrow to witness the outcome of this 3-year agreement between us father and son. Of course, this is also the time for me to formally introduce my successor. It must be grand enough." Charney, the head of the Gould family, was one of the top 10 richest people in Chaos City. Adams was his only son, and he had been working hard to nurture him to be the successor of the Gould family and an outstanding businessman. However, Adams had no interest in doing business since he was young. Instead, he was very interested in the knight's martial arts that he had learned to strengthen his body. In the end, the relationship between father and son was strained. In order to let Adams return to the family business voluntarily, Charney made a 3-year agreement with him 3 years ago. If Adams couldn't become a 4th-tier knight in 3 years, he had to come back to inherit the family business. If he successfully broke through to the 4th tier, Charney wouldn't care about Adams becoming a knight anymore. At first, he was still worried that with Adams' talent, he wouldn't be able to break through in these 3 years. However, the good news was that 3 years had passed, and his ability had not improved at all. He was still a third-tier knight. The Gould family has been doing business for generations. How could they have any talent in martial arts? This kid still wants to become a mid-tier knight. He must be dreaming. He'll have to learn from me obediently in the future, and inherit the Gould family's property properly. Charney smiled proudly as if he could already see the lively banquet tomorrow. He was finally going to get what he wanted, and retirement was not far away. Warden, the damaged equipment has been repaired successfully. We have doubled the number of wardens patrolling as per your instructions, the deputy warden reported to Wesley. He glanced at Rex, who was standing not far away, and couldn't help but ask softly, "Warden, is he really the deputy warden now?" "This is the appointment order signed by the city lord. If you have any objections, you can raise them at the city lord's castle." Wesley took out an appointment order and opened it in front of the deputy warden. After that, he glanced at Rex with a complicated expression and said, "Also, don't you feel especially safe with him around?" Chapter 11:18. Thank you for coming. Meg smiled as he sent off the last customer. He flipped over the plaque on the door and entered the restaurant. "All right, the rest of the time belongs to us. Are we going to have supper?" Amy's eyes lit up as she asked expectantly. Everyone's gaze also turned to Meg. Clap clap. Meg clapped his hands, and the lights in the restaurant suddenly dimmed. Almost at the same time, several candles were lit, and Barbara slowly pushed a small cart out. On the cart was a large ice cream cake with 18 candles on it. In the center of the cake was a little person in a maid's outfit. It was none other than Yabamiya. "Happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you." Everyone began to hum the birthday song as they looked at Yabamiya with smiles on their faces. This is... Yabamiya's mouth gaped open in surprise as she looked at the cake and everyone else. Soon, tears began to well up in her eyes. "Happy birthday, Mia," Meg said with a smile as he walked forward and placed a silver crown on her head. "Happy birthday, big sister Mia." Amy jumped forward and called out with a smile. "Happy birthday, Mia." Everyone also offered their birthday wishes and small gifts. Elizabeth smiled as she looked at the teary-eyed Mia. Although this little girl had suffered a lot, she had now met a group of companions who treated her very well. "Thank you. Thank you." Mia hugged the gifts and nodded in response. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she had to tilt her head up to prevent them from flowing out. In her past life, aside from her mother, no one had ever cared about her birthday, and no one had ever celebrated her birthday or prepared a birthday present for her. But today, this exquisite birthday cake, as well as the various birthday presents in her hands, made her feel a little overwhelmed. "According to our customs, you have to eat cake on your birthday. Before you blow out the candles, you can make a wish. Perhaps it will come true," Meg said as he looked at Mia. "Yes." Mia nodded and stood in front of the cake that was filled with candles. She put her palms together and closed her eyes. She began to make a wish sincerely. After a while, she opened her eyes and blew out 18 candles in one breath. The lights came on again, and everyone smiled. Meg had told them yesterday that he was going to celebrate Mia's birthday. Only Mia didn't know about it. "Okay, let's cut the cake." Meg handed the knife that had been soaked in hot water to Mia. Mia placed the gift in her hand to the side and cut the ice cream cake into triangular pieces. She placed them on exquisite small plates and distributed them to everyone. "This cake is delicious," Amy said in surprise after taking a bite of the cake. "Yeah, today's cake is even more delicious than usual." "Is it because it's Mia's birthday cake?" Barbara nodded. She then smeared some cream on the cake and tapped it on Mia's nose. Everyone ate the delicious cake, and in the second half of the meal, it became a cake battle. The ice cream cake was smeared on one's face, and the cool sensation was quite interesting. Joyful laughter reverberated in the restaurant, and the girls even danced the dance that they had just learned. Meg stood off to the side with a glass of beer in his hand. This birthday party in this alternate world was quite successful. After the revelry, everyone cleaned up the restaurant and left. "Thank you, boss," Mia said with a sob as she looked at Mag and went up to hug him tightly. "It's what I should do." Meg smiled and gently rubbed her head that was resting on his chest. He had picked her up at the door, and she was very adorable from the moment they met. Big sister Mia hugged father, and father gently rubbed her head. Is this overstepping his boundaries? Should I write it down? Amy fell into deep thought as she looked at the two of them hugging each other. Mia raised her head from Meg's arms and suddenly realized that she had taken the initiative to hug her boss. She blushed and took 2 steps back. Then, she said with a serious expression, "From tomorrow onwards, I'll work even harder." "You've already worked hard enough. Go back and have a good sleep." Meg shook his head with a smile. Mia's work attitude could only be described as a model worker. If she continued to work hard, he would feel quite embarrassed. Everyone bade farewell to each other. "Mia, I want to take you to a place." On the way back, Elizabeth stopped and turned to look at Mia, whose cheeks were still red. "Big sister, I also have something to say to you." Mia stopped in her tracks and looked at Elizabeth. She whispered, "If I like boss, can we be together?" "You like him?" Elizabeth looked at Mia with a complicated expression. She was a little annoyed, but at the same time, she had expected this. "I don't know." Mia shook her head. She looked a little lost. "But, no one has ever treated me as well as he did. That day, when I escaped from the kitchen of that little restaurant, I thought I was dead. He brought me delicious food and let me stay as a member of the restaurant. He was the one who told me that I wasn't that bad. He was the one who taught me self-confidence and self-respect. He was also the one who gave me so many friendships in you. I don't know if I've really fallen in love with him, but I don't think any other man will be as important to me as he is to me." Mia's gaze became firm. She looked at Elizabeth and smiled. "I think this is what it means to like someone." Elizabeth looked at Mia for a long time. Her eyes were filled with heartache. She was about to say something, but she couldn't bring herself to say it. After a moment of silence, she nodded. "He is indeed a good person. But, I don't want to tell him." Mia looked at Elizabeth and pleaded, "Can you keep this a secret for me?" "Why? If you like him, shouldn't you tell him directly?" Elizabeth was confused. "No." Mia shook her head and sighed. "He's so outstanding. Only people like Miss Gloria and Miss Luna are compatible with him. I'm just a half-dragon who doesn't know anything. I don't deserve to be with him." Gloria looked at Mia, who was grabbing her skirt and biting her lips. Gloria's heart skipped a beat. She grabbed Mia's hand and shook her head. "You're not a low-level half-dragon. You're the princess of the Frost Dragon tribe and will become a real golden dragon." Chapter 11:19. The Frost Dragon streaked across the sky, and flew out of Chaos City into the distance. Mia sat on the dragon's back, and her panicked expression gradually calmed down. Then, she spread open her arms and welcomed the oncoming wind with an excited smile on her face. Even though this wasn't the first time she had flown into the sky on Elizabeth's back, it still felt very strange to be all alone. She enjoyed the feeling of the wind brushing past her and the pitch-black mountain range passing by quickly. She was like a free bird that could soar freely in this vast sky. Elizabeth landed on the summit of a tall mountain. The summit of the mountain was relatively flat, and there were rocks all over it. Occasionally, the cries of wild beasts could be heard from the forest below. "Big sister, why did you bring me here?" Yabamiya looked at Elizabeth, who had transformed back into her human form. She looked around curiously. This place should be very far away from Chaos City. "What I said to you just now was not to comfort you." A ring appeared in Elizabeth's hand. Light flashed, and a box that was emanating golden light fell into her hand. "What's this?" "This is the Golden Dragon origin. Father prepared it for you on your coming-of-age ceremony," Elizabeth said. Father prepared it for me." Yabamiya was taken aback. She looked at the golden box in Elizabeth's hand with a panicked expression. "Yes. I've been looking for him for the past few years, but I couldn't find him. I only found this ring in Chaos City. He left a message in the ring telling me of your existence, and asked me to give you this golden dragon origin on your coming-of-age ceremony so that you can break free from your half-dragon body and become a true giant golden dragon." Elizabeth nodded. But why didn't he come to see me himself? Since he appeared in Chaos City, why didn't he come to see me and Mother?" Mia's lips trembled slightly as she tried to hold back her tears. "I think he has his reasons. He has too many enemies in this world. Perhaps he just doesn't want others to know of your existence." Elizabeth went forward and hugged Mia gently. "Even though he has many flaws, I believe that he still loves us. But I really, really want to see him." Yabamiya couldn't hold it in anymore. She buried her head in Elizabeth's arms and began to cry. Elizabeth gently patted her back, tears flashing in her eyes. How could she not feel the same way? After a long while, Yabamiya's emotions finally calmed down. "Fuse with this dragon origin. It's your coming-of-age ceremony today, and the effect is the best." Elizabeth handed the glowing box to Mia. "Just bite your finger and drip your blood on the box." Mia held the golden box with both hands, and a warm feeling came from the box as if there was a life hidden inside. After a moment of hesitation, she bit her finger, and squeezed out a drop of golden blood, which she dripped onto the box. The faint golden light became extremely dazzling all of a sudden. Following a series of cracking sounds, the square box shattered like an eggshell, revealing a translucent golden ball within. It was soft to the touch, just like a peeled egg. Within that translucent eggshell, there was a little golden dragon swimming slowly. Roar! Right at this moment, a soft roar sounded from within the eggshell. That little golden dragon suddenly broke out of the eggshell. It flapped its wings, and crashed into Yabamiya's glabella. It transformed into a golden light, and disappeared into her glabella. Yabamiya's body suddenly froze like a wooden statue. Golden light flashed in her dual-colored eyes, and it seemed that she was undergoing a miraculous transformation. It should be a success, right? Elizabeth stood at the side with a tinge of nervousness. The golden light flowed through Yabamiya's body, and her golden dragon tail sprang out almost instantly. Following that, golden scales appeared on her cheeks and wrists. These were the changes that happened after she ate the Buddha jumps over the wall. However, the transformation didn't stop there. The golden light became even more dazzling, and following a series of soft cracking sounds, Yabamiya's body began to expand. Her maid outfit was torn apart. Fine golden scales covered her body, and then they quickly grew in size. In the blink of an eye, a golden dragon with a wingspan of more than 50 meters appeared on the mountain peak. The golden scales on her slender body were emitting light, and they were dazzling under the moonlight. "It's a success!" Elizabeth exclaimed in surprise. She glanced at the golden dragon's body, and her expression became even more surprised. She actually has the strength of a level 6 after just evolving. Roar! Yabamiya opened her eyes, and subconsciously opened her mouth to let out a cry. However, she realized that she had let out a majestic dragon's roar. What happened to me? She was stunned for a moment, and then she looked down. Elizabeth, who was standing in front of her, was now standing there like a small ant. Sister, why did you become smaller? Mia was a little surprised. I didn't become smaller. You became bigger, Elizabeth said with a smile. I became bigger. Mia was stunned for a moment, and when she looked down again, her eyes widened. Golden dragon scales, golden wings, golden claws. What a huge golden dragon. Where are my breasts? Mia blurted out. However, she quickly came back to her senses. This wasn't the time to be calculative about this. How did she become such a huge golden dragon in the blink of an eye? This change was too much for her to handle. Don't worry. After fusing with the golden dragon source, you've gotten rid of your identity as a half-dragon and successfully evolved into a golden dragon. This is your dragon form, Elizabeth said with a smile. I've really become a golden dragon. Although Elizabeth had mentioned it before, when it really happened, Mia still felt that it was unreal. Her identity as a half-dragon had caused her to be humiliated since she was young. She had never thought that she would one day be able to get rid of this identity and become a noble dragon. Yes. From today onwards, you're a real golden dragon, Elizabeth said with certainty. Can I fly? After a moment of confusion, Mia finally calmed down and asked Elizabeth with anticipation. As a dragon, flying is the most basic ability. I'm falling. Before Elizabeth could finish her sentence, Mia, who had flapped her wings twice, fell from the top of the mountain. Impatient fellow, Elizabeth sighed and took a step forward. She transformed into a frost dragon and swooped down. Not long after, a golden dragon flapped her wings clumsily like a drowning person and flew up from the bottom of the mountain in a strange posture. A frost dragon slowly rose up to accompany her. Chapter 11:20. The golden dragon flew unsteadily in the sky. However, under the protection of the frost dragon, she gradually mastered the flying techniques and was able to fly normally. She then tried out some techniques such as turning and ascending. Whoa, this is so fun! The golden dragon flapped her wings and glided over the mountain peak. She bent over the mountain stream and flew close to the forest, leaving behind a string of bell-like laughter. She is indeed very talented. Elizabeth appeared at the top of the mountain, and looked at Mia, who had mastered the flying technique, with a smile on her face. Mia had her fun and landed on the mountain peak. She retracted her wings and transformed back into her human form. Ah! My clothes! When she landed, she realized that her clothes had been torn to shreds during her transformation. She hurriedly reached out to cover her breasts and lower body. Thank goodness my breasts are still here. She held her heavy breasts and heaved a sigh of relief. Sister, my clothes are gone. What should I do now? Mia looked at Elizabeth for help. Dragons don't need to wear clothes. However, it is much more troublesome after you transform into a human. You can use your scales to transform into any kind of clothes, Elizabeth said as she demonstrated a small spell. Mia blinked, and imitated the spell. Golden light flashed, and a maid outfit identical to the one she was wearing appeared on her body. It really appeared. Mia looked at the clothes on her body in surprise. She reached out to touch them. Other than the fact that the material was a little slippery, the style was no different from her previous clothes. However, these clothes were transformed from her scales. When she touched them, she felt as if her skin was being touched. This made her feel a little uncomfortable. It seems like I have to ask the boss to give me a new set of clothes. Otherwise, it will be very inconvenient for me to work, Mia thought to herself. Elizabeth said, clothes transformed from your scales will not be damaged during your transformation. If you want to wear normal clothes, it is best not to transform on the day. Okay. Yabamiya nodded. After hesitating for a while, she took 2 steps forward and said, Sister, there is something I have been wanting to ask you. I want to know, who hurt you before? Who inflicted such severe injuries on you? Yabamiya asked with a serious expression as she looked into Elizabeth's eyes. Elizabeth's eyes revealed a hint of surprise. After hesitating for a moment, she shook her head slightly and said, You don't have to know about this. No, I want to know. Yabamiya said firmly, You are my only family. Although I am not as strong as you, I want to protect you. I want to stay by your side. Elizabeth felt as if her heart had skipped a beat. Looking at Mia's resolute gaze, her heart suddenly felt warm. No one had ever said such words to her. No one had ever said that they would stay by her side, and no one had ever promised to protect her. Even her mother had been telling her since she was young that she was the only one who could be responsible for her own life. No one would protect her, and no one would protect her. Elizabeth was silent for a moment before she said calmly, Do you want to learn how to fight from me? Yabamiya was stunned for a moment, but she quickly nodded and said, Yes, I want to learn. Okay, when you can really protect me, I will tell you the truth. Elizabeth nodded with a faint smile. She spread open her arms and transformed into a frost dragon again. She flew into the sky and looked down at Yabamiya. From today onwards, I will cultivate with you for 3 hours every night before going back to sleep. Okay. Yabamiya nodded. She transformed into a golden dragon and flew after the frost dragon. You are late. Meg looked at Camilla, who was standing at the door with her arms crossed. She was wearing a black dress with a high slit, a black windbreaker, and a black gauze hat. He frowned slightly and said, Also, where is your uniform? Although I agreed to your request and reluctantly joined your restaurant, when I come to work and what I wear, it is none of your business. Camilla glanced at Meg and smiled disdainfully. Do you know our madam's noble status? How can a mere human like you order her around? The black cat servant, who was wrapped in a black robe, stepped forward and yelled at the top of his voice. In that case, it seems that I have to announce the photo stone and let everyone know that our noble Madam Countess is a perverted masochist. Meg smiled. Camilla's expression froze. If the photo stone was announced, wouldn't Miss Gloria know that she was a masochist? No. Such a thing must not happen. She had to leave a perfect image in Miss Gloria's mind. Ahem, I didn't sleep well last night, so I woke up a little late. I will be on time tomorrow. Camilla coughed dryly. Madam. The black cat servant's voice was filled with shock. Where are your clothes? Meg's gaze stopped at the deep cleavage in front of her chest for a while and asked. I brought my clothes. I plan to change when I get to the restaurant. Camilla looked around. After all, with my status, if people know that I am a waitress, it will be hard for me to go out and meet people. Being a waitress is a proper job. Meg rolled his eyes. However, seeing how careful Camilla was, he did not say anything more and let her enter the restaurant first. The black cat servant also wanted to enter the restaurant. The restaurant doesn't allow pets in. Employees are also not allowed to bring pets to work. Meg raised his hand to stop the black-robed servant. Even though the servant appeared to be a human being, he knew exactly what was hidden within the servant's robe. I am Caesar, the most loyal servant of the Madam Countess. I must always serve the Madam. Wow. What a big black cat. Before Caesar could finish speaking, his black robe was suddenly torn off by Amy, who had appeared out of nowhere. Caesar, who was floating in mid-air, was stunned for a moment before he meowed and fell to the ground. He arched his back, and the black fur all over his body stood up like needles as he looked at Amy with a panicked expression. Meow. Ugly Duckling jumped out from behind Amy and stood in front of Amy. Its claws were exposed from its little chubby paws as it looked at Caesar eagerly. Meow. Caesar immediately tucked his tail between his legs and curled up on the ground, not daring to move. He peeked at Ugly Duckling from the corner of his eyes. Useless. Camilla turned around to look at Caesar. She waved her hand and said, "Go back." Meow. As if he had been pardoned, Caesar did not even know how to speak human language. He turned around and disappeared with a whoosh. Chapter 11:21. The first room on the right is the bathroom. You can change there, Meg said to Camilla. Camilla responded and swayed her hips as she went upstairs. Soon, she changed into the chef's uniform that Meg had prepared for her and came downstairs. Is big sister Camilla a chef too? Amy asked curiously. It's the same chef's uniform as mine, Anna said with a nod. Yes, I'm best at blood salad and cold heart slices. Camilla licked her lips with her bright red tongue and revealed 2 sharp teeth in an attempt to scare the 2 lucky fellows. Blood salad. Cold heart slices. Is it good? Amy asked curiously. She did not look scared at all. It's all right. Camilla nodded, a little disappointed. Is it human blood? Anna's voice trembled slightly. There was a hint of fear in her eyes. Human blood won't do. Usually, human blood is very dirty and disgusting to drink. Camilla looked at Anna. She was very satisfied with this lucky fellow's performance. She bent down and continued with a smile, "It has to be a beautiful and kind lady. Their blood is sweet. Of course, a cute scorpion spirit like you is also very good." "Ah!" Anna screamed and hid behind Meg. She looked at Camilla with fear. "Anna, don't be afraid. She's just scaring you." Meg reached out and patted Anna's head to comfort her. Then, he looked at Camilla and said, "Your main job today is to learn how to prepare ingredients from Phyllis. Remember how to prepare each ingredient and how to use it." "Do I still need to learn such a simple job?" Camilla pursed her lips and walked toward the kitchen proudly. "Hello." Phyllis and Camilla greeted each other, but the wind blades didn't stop. The green wind blades were like sharp knives, easily slicing the ingredients into countless pieces and accurately placing them into different ingredient boxes. Camilla, who was standing at the kitchen door, looked at the ingredients and wind blades flying around with her mouth wide open. How the hell was he going to learn this? A smile appeared on Mag's face as he looked at Phyrus patiently teaching Camilla the cutting technique. At the same time, he felt even more of a pity that such a talented apprentice was going to leave. That would be a huge loss. As for Camilla, Meg didn't really want to do whatever he wanted with her film. After all, he was an honest person. Letting her work as a waiter in the restaurant was firstly to punish her for kidnapping him, and secondly to prevent her from continuing to cause trouble. He was in the light, while she was in the dark. Who knew if she would be ambushed again when she went out in the future? The best way to prevent it was to put her right in front of his eyes and use love and wisdom to influence her so that she would give up those stupid thoughts. Camilla, who was in the kitchen, glanced at Mag, and thought to herself, "It's so infuriating to see how smug this fellow is. One day, I will tie you up again and let you have a taste of the whip and candles." "Miss Anna, don't be afraid. Isn't it just 2 dishes? Let big sister Camilla cook for us next time." Amy also consoled her with a smile. I don't want to eat." Anna shook her head like a rattledrum. After hesitating for a while, she still went into the kitchen to help. "Father, Daphne said that they are going to have their holidays soon. Does that mean that I am going to have my holidays soon too? The kind where we can play for many, many days, and sleep in every day." Amy looked up at Meg with anticipation written all over her little face. It's winter holidays again. Meg was a little surprised. Chaos School's holiday system was a little similar to China's. There was a 2-month holiday during the hottest part of summer, and a 1-month holiday during the coldest part of winter. Calculating the time, it was almost time for the holidays in half a month. However, although Amy was now considered half a student of Chaos School, she had always been learning magic from her 2 teachers, Crassus and Julian. He wasn't sure if they would follow Chaos School's holiday system. Meg smiled and said, "When I send you to school later, I will ask Teacher Crassus when Amy can have her holidays." Amy nodded obediently. She shrunk her neck and mumbled, "It's so cold in winter. It would be great if I could sleep under my warm blanket every day." Meg shook his head with a smile. He couldn't blame Amy. In such a cold winter, no one would want to leave their warm blanket. Ding! The bell hanging on the door rang, and Yabamiya and Elizabeth pushed the door open and walked in. Phew, the restaurant is still the warmest. Yabamiya heaved a sigh of relief. Then, she smiled energetically, and said, "Good morning, boss, Amy." "Good morning, big sister Mia, big sister Elizabeth." Amy also greeted the 2 of them. "Good morning." Elizabeth nodded slightly. She still didn't smile. "You guys are early today." Meg looked at the 2 of them in surprise. They were about 15 minutes earlier than usual. Yabamiya looked at Meg with a blush, and said, "Boss, can you give me another maid uniform? My work uniform is bursting." Bursting? Meg was slightly stunned. His gaze subconsciously fell on Mia's chest. Compared to when she was first picked up by him, it had indeed become a lot bigger. However, it seemed a little exaggerated to say that her clothes were bursting. Meg's scorching gaze made Mia's face even redder. She quickly lowered her head and said, "It's not bursting. It's because I transformed into a real giant dragon yesterday. That's why my clothes burst." Mia transformed into a real giant dragon. Meg was shocked. He carefully looked at Mia. Compared to yesterday, although her appearance didn't change much, she had the strength of a 6th tier. She went from a half-dragon with some brute strength to a 6th-tier powerhouse overnight. The only explanation for all of this was that she had transformed into a dragon. Could it be because she ate the Buddha jumps over the wall? Yesterday, 2 knights successfully broke through after eating the Buddha jumps over the wall. Mia also showed some signs of atavism at that time. The Buddha jumps over the wall does have a promotion effect. Mia nodded. She subconsciously looked at Elizabeth. Meg saw that Mia didn't take the initiative to say anything, so he didn't ask further. He looked at her clothes and asked curiously, "Then what's with the clothes you're wearing? Didn't you say that your clothes burst?" As he said that, he reached out and touched her collar. It was smooth and comfortable. However, it wasn't very close to the skin. It was a little cold to the touch. It was a rather strange material. "That's strange. What material is this?" He touched her skirt again, but he still couldn't figure out what material it was. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Chapter 11:22. Meg's hand slid from the collar to the hem of the dress, carefully appreciating the material of the dress. At the same time, he was curious as to how Mia had managed to make such an exact replica of her maid costume. Yabamiya's face was red as she let out a long moan. Meg was stunned for a moment. He looked at Mia, who was suddenly blushing, her chest rising and falling violently, and biting her lips. He didn't seem to have done anything, did he? Why did she look like she was about to die? When Meg's slender fingers slid across Mia's collar, it was as if he was caressing her collarbone. When he grabbed the hem of her dress, her perky bottom seemed to have been electrocuted. She allowed his warm hands to rub it, and a numbing sensation instantly spread throughout her body, almost making her unable to stand properly. "Boss, you're so naughty." Mia's face was as red as an apple due to the intense embarrassment. She looked at Meg with a hint of gentleness in her eyes. She said with some difficulty, This is my scale, aw." Meg was stunned for a moment. He subconsciously squeezed it again and nodded. "No wonder it's so smooth." "Aw," Mia couldn't help but moan again. Tears were already welling up in her eyes. "Oh, I'm sorry, Mia. This is the first time I've seen a dress made from dragon scales, so I was a little curious," Meg said apologetically as he retracted his hand awkwardly. He also realized that his actions were a little abrupt. It's okay." Yabamiya shook her head and replied weakly. The numbing sensation in her bottom hadn't completely subsided. After Meg's hand moved away, she felt an inexplicable sense of disappointment. "What's wrong with me?" "No. I'm definitely not that kind of person. Mr. Meg just doesn't know," Mia thought to herself. She tried hard to get rid of the strange thoughts in her mind, but she couldn't help but recall that strange feeling. Elizabeth glanced at Yabamiya, then looked at Meg. After a moment of hesitation, she slowly unclenched her fists. "I'll go prepare your clothes," Meg said, then turned around and went upstairs. The current situation seemed a bit awkward, so he should escape first. Father touched Big Sister Mia, causing Big Sister Mia to make strange noises. "Should I write this down?" In the corner, Amy took out a small notebook and had a thoughtful expression on her face. "Are you okay?" Elizabeth looked at Mia and asked softly. "Yeah, I'm fine." Mia nodded and forced a smile. "Boss doesn't know, so you can't blame him for this." Elizabeth replied noncommittally. Meg went upstairs and asked the system to make a new maid outfit for Yabamiya. He took the clothes and was about to go downstairs when Gina walked out of the room while yawning. When she saw Meg, she walked straight to him and gave him a big hug. She then greeted him with a smile. "Good morning, Mr. Meg." "Good morning, Gina." Meg pulled his face out of the deep cleavage and panted as he greeted her helplessly. It was too painful to go through this kind of face-cleansing type of morning every day. This had already caused him to postpone the date of assigning Gina to the staff dormitory. So fragrant. "I'm going back to Lantis today to bring back the shark's fin and shark's lips for you," Gina said to Meg. "You don't know how to fly. If you want to go back, you'll have to spend a lot of time on the road, right?" Meg looked at Gina. After purchasing the real-time translation system from the system, he could already have daily conversations with Gina. He would even teach her some common language when he was free. He still had 2 sets of shark's fin and shark's lips, which were enough to make 2 pots of Buddha jumps over the wall today. However, there were no more ingredients for Buddha jumps over the wall tomorrow. It was indeed necessary to start the supply chain of Lantis. Gina smiled and said, "Miss Elizabeth agreed to go back with me today, but the high priest said that he would soon think of a way to transport the shark's fin and shark's lips." "All right then." Meg nodded. With the power of the Lantistians, it shouldn't be a problem to think of a way to transport them. Since he didn't need to use his brain, he didn't ask further. "Mr. Meg is still as handsome as yesterday," Gina said to herself as she covered her face with her hand as she looked at Meg's back view as he turned around and went downstairs. "Mia, these are the clothes I prepared for you previously. You can go upstairs and change first." Meg went downstairs and passed the clothes to Mia. "Oh, all right." Yabamiya took the clothes and walked upstairs. She rubbed her face with the clothes when she went up the stairs. She smiled blissfully and said, so Mr. Meg had already prepared the clothes for me. Elizabeth's clothes. Meg looked at Elizabeth. He remembered that she transformed directly the last time. Could it be that she didn't wear any clothes, and used her scales to transform into clothes? Elizabeth took 2 steps back and distanced herself from Meg. She looked at Meg warily, and the surrounding temperature dropped by a few degrees. Don't misunderstand. I'm just curious. Meg quickly put his hands behind his back to show his innocence. I won't let anyone touch me, Elizabeth said proudly. Sister Elizabeth, let's go dance, Amy said as she held the music box and tugged at Elizabeth's skirt gently. That seems to be the case. Meg looked at Amy's hand, and turned around to go into the kitchen with a smile. Elizabeth. What should we dance to? Amy continued to ask. Let's do the dance we did last time. Elizabeth looked at Amy's adorable face, but she couldn't bring herself to be angry at her, so she said helplessly. Count me in. Mia, who had changed her clothes, quickly came downstairs and joined the dance team. Meg entered the kitchen and was speechless as he looked at Camilla, who was wielding the 10 knives so skillfully that they looked like they were glinting. Camilla's sharp fingernails inspired Meg, so he asked the system to customize 2 sets of finger knives for her. As the name suggested, they were 10 thin and long knives that were fixed to the fingers. They could be wielded as easily as fingernails, and they replaced Camilla's fingernails. Just as Meg expected, with these 10-finger knives, Camilla was like a tiger that had grown wings. She could easily cut the ingredients into the shape she needed. Although she was slower than Phyllis, there was no one else in Amy's who could compare to her, including Meg. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. With a swipe of the finger knives, a winter bamboo shoot was cut into a pile of grain-sized particles and fell into a box. Ha! How can such a simple job stump me? Camilla smiled proudly. She used her mind to control a handful of green beans, and then she cut them into grain-sized particles in the blink of an eye. She liked the sound of cutting and the feeling of cutting. It gave her an inexplicable sense of pleasure. This is probably the real-life version of cutting fruit, right? Meg raised his eyebrows. Chapter 11:23. All right, let's eat first, Meg said with a smile as he took off his apron and watched as Mia placed the last dish on the table. Don't I have to pay to eat all this? Camilla asked hesitantly as she looked at the sumptuous dishes on the table. Yes, this is one of the benefits of the restaurant's employees. Meg nodded. Speaking of which, the restaurant's employees' allowance was many times higher than their salary. Then can I have another helping of tofu pudding? Camilla's eyes lit up. Meg shook his head. No, even the waiters can only have 1 helping of tofu pudding per meal. If you eat too much, you will be overnourished. All right. Camilla sat down at the empty seat. It was rare that she didn't ask any questions. She picked up her chopsticks and ate quietly. After breakfast, Meg pushed the bicycle to send Amy to school. Camilla, who had finished her work for the morning, flew out of the back window and left the restaurant quietly. Madam, are we really going to be played by a human just because of a photo stone? Caesar said in an alley as if he had been humiliated. Even a little fat cat can scare you so much that you run away with your tail between your legs. You are such an embarrassment to me, Camilla said disdainfully as she glanced at Caesar. Madam, you can't blame me. That little fatty is definitely not an ordinary cat. Every time I face it, I have a fear that comes from the depths of my soul. Shut up. Camilla interrupted Caesar. She clenched her fists and said, I will never give in so easily. Agreeing to stay at Amy's was just a delaying tactic. My goal is to gain his trust first, and then find a chance to steal the photo stone. That way, I won't be controlled by him anymore. Madam, you are indeed a good strategist. Caesar praised immediately. All right, let's make a plan now. Tonight, Meg brought a breakfast of soy milk and youtiao with him as he sent Amy to the new magic lab. The new magic lab built by Crassus had been completed. It was 3 times the size of the previous magic classroom. It was located in the northwest corner of Chaos School. It was a standalone building with no other buildings around it. From the outside, it looked like a square black box. There was nothing special about it. However, those who had visited this place would know that this was the most advanced magic lab in Chaos City, or even the entire Norland continent. It contained all kinds of auxiliary equipment and training rooms that were required for all stages of magic. At the same time, it also had a pink amusement park. Yes, this was Amy's exclusive magic lab. Boss Mag, your youtiao is really delicious. I will have youtiao with savory soy milk for breakfast every morning from now on, Crassus said with a smile as he took the breakfast from Mag and chewed on the youtiao noisily. Master Crassus, the other children are going to have their holidays soon. When are you going to give me a holiday? Amy asked eagerly before Meg could say anything. Cough, cough. Crassus, who had just drunk a mouthful of soy milk, choked and coughed dryly. He looked at Amy in confusion. Holiday? What holiday? Do we need a holiday to learn magic? Master Crassus, it's like this. The students of Chaos School have a holiday every year during the coldest time of winter. At the same time, it's also to welcome the Peace Day holiday. During the hottest time of summer, they also have a 2-month holiday to avoid the heat. Meg explained with a smile. In his memory, only Chaos School implemented the holiday during winter and summer vacations. The students of Rhoda didn't have it. Crassus frowned and said, the teachers of Chaos School really know how to enjoy life. They don't teach the children knowledge and abilities properly, and only think about living a comfortable life all day. They don't teach during the hot summer, and don't teach during the cold winter. They even make it sound so nice, and push all the responsibility to the students. This kind of bad practice can't be learned. That seems to make sense. Meg nodded thoughtfully. No, I want a holiday too. Amy put her hands on her hips and pouted. Why can other children have a holiday, but I can't? Amy wants a holiday too. Crassus persuaded earnestly, Little Amy, learning magic is something that requires long-term persistence. If we don't practice for a month or 2 from time to time, magic will be wasted. Then, we won't be able to become a powerful magic caster. You're building your foundation now. If you neglect magic, it will be a very bad thing. Meg looked at Amy. Although he knew that Amy wanted a holiday, this was, after all, a negotiation between the little one and the teacher. So, he chose to remain silent and let Amy make her own choice. Amy put down her hands, and asked Crassus hesitantly, if I have a holiday, I won't be able to become a powerful magic caster. Crassus nodded, and said, yes. For the next 3 months, I have already formulated an intensive curriculum schedule. If Amy can follow it, she might have a chance to successfully break through to the 7th tier, and become a high-level magic caster. Amy glanced at Meg, and then asked, if I become a high-level magic caster, will I be able to protect Father? Crassus nodded, and said, if you become a high-level magic caster, it means that you will have become a powerhouse standing at a higher position in this world. Of course, you will be able to protect Mr. Mac. Then, I don't want a holiday. I want to continue learning magic, Amy said firmly. A smile appeared on Meg's face. He didn't expect the little one to give up a holiday to protect him. His heart instantly warmed, and he respected her choice. Good, good, good. Crassus said good 3 times in a row. His precious disciple had become a high-level magic caster after learning magic for half a year. She was definitely going to be a legend in the history of the Norland continent. Lord Crassus, Meg, then I'll go back first, Meg said, and turned to leave. Have you heard? Amy's released a soup called a Buddha Jumps Over the Wall yesterday. It's priced at 10,000 copper coins, an old man said with a chuckle in a morning tea house. Is that boss crazy? 10,000 copper coins for a bowl? Would there be such an idiot who would buy it? Someone at the side quickly chimed in, and the other customers also looked over. You don't say. They released a total of 10 bowls yesterday, and they were all sold out in a short while. Seems like there are quite a lot of idiots in this world. Then you don't know the effects of Buddha Jumps Over the Wall. I heard that 2 knights broke through on the spot after eating it. The most amazing thing is that after drinking this Buddha Jumps Over the Wall, even balding hair grew out, the old man exclaimed. Wow! Chapter 11:24. Mag was riding his bicycle slowly along the street where there weren't many pedestrians when a broom suddenly fell to the ground in front of him. He was so scared that he immediately slammed on the brakes. I'm so sorry. An old man who was sitting on a bench at the side of the road stood up and picked up the broom that had fallen to the ground as he apologized to Mag with an apologetic expression. Meg glanced at the old man. He was about 60 years old. Half of his hair was white, but the wrinkles on his face were very deep. There was frost on his messy beard and eyebrows. He was wrapped in a tattered black jacket, and there was an armband on his left arm with the words, Aiden Square Janitor, written on it. He seemed to be a janitor. There was an old lady standing next to the bench. She was also in her 50s or 60s. She had a hunched back and a thin figure. She was holding half a biscuit in her hand and looking at him nervously. It's okay, Meg said with a smile. The old man's politeness made him feel a little embarrassed. The roadblock had been cleared. Meg lifted his leg and was about to continue riding. Hey, old man, you don't have to do that. I'm not hungry. You can eat some. I won't eat. The old lady's voice sounded. Meg turned around in confusion. He saw the old man take out half a biscuit and pinch it as if he were pinching a rock. He said anxiously, It's too cold. It's usually soft. Why can't it warm up today? It's okay. I'm not hungry. The old lady shook her head. She looked at the biscuit and swallowed hard. She then looked away. Then I'll get some water for you to soak it in. You can eat it when it's soft. The old man handed the biscuit to the old lady. He turned around and took out a bamboo cup from a basket filled with trash. He twisted it twice and opened the lid. His eyes reddened when he saw the thin layer of ice in the cup. Okay, hurry up and eat. Then we'll get to work. It's so cold. The sooner we finish cleaning, the sooner we can go back. The old lady stuffed the biscuits in her hand into the old man's hand and took the bamboo tube from his hand. She closed the lid and put it back into the basket on her back. There was a smile on her wrinkled face. Meg hesitated for a moment before getting out of the car and parking it. He looked at the old man and said, Sir, is there anything I can help you with? The old man looked back at Meg and was stunned for a moment. He then looked around and asked uncertainly, Are you talking to me? Old Jack and his wife had been sweeping the Aiden Square for more than 10 years. Because they dealt with garbage all year round, people usually avoided them. This gentleman in front of him was handsome and dressed in extraordinary clothes, and he actually took the initiative to greet him. This was something that had never happened before. Yes, I see that you seem to have encountered some difficulties. Do you need my help? Meg nodded. It's not difficult. We came to the square at 4 in the morning to start sweeping. We brought some dry food to eat, but because the weather is too cold, it's frozen stiff. Usually, I use my body temperature to soften it before giving it to her, but today it's too cold. I can't soften it no matter how hard I try. The hot water we brought has also frozen because it's been too long. I'm fine with it. I can swallow it with some effort, but my wife doesn't have many teeth left. She's cold and hungry. If she doesn't eat something to fill her stomach, I'm afraid her body won't be able to take it, old Jack said. His eyes turned red again, and his face was full of self-blame. "Oh, why do you make me sound so useless? My body is fine. Let's not waste this gentleman's precious time." The old lady rolled her eyes at old Jack. She smiled at Meg and said, "Sir, you can go ahead with your work. We're fine." Meg looked at the old lady. Although her tattered clothes were mended, her smile was as clean as a flower blooming in the snow. It made people feel very comfortable. What a kind old lady. Meg sighed in his heart. Looking at the pancakes in their hands, he felt a little heartache. Ding! The host has taken pity on the two cleaners and triggered a new mission. The cleaners in the Aiden Square keep the Aiden Square clean and tidy. Every day, they start cleaning at 4 in the morning. They work for several hours in the -10 degrees Celsius temperature. They are tired and hungry, and they can't even eat a mouthful of piping hot food before they finish their work. The host has to promise to provide the cleaners in the Aiden Square with a piping hot porridge with pork and century egg for breakfast. Mission reward, a recipe for porridge with pork and century egg. Punishment for mission failure, clean the Aiden Square alone. Just then, the system's voice suddenly sounded in Meg's mind. Meg was stunned. He did take pity on them, but he only wanted to buy breakfast for the couple and provide them with some water. He didn't expect the system to ask him to provide breakfast for all the cleaners in the Aiden Square. It wasn't a big problem. However, he felt a little uncomfortable being forced to be a good person. System, are you forcing me to do good deeds? As a gourmet system, isn't this a little out of line? Meg said in his heart, feeling a little displeased. Host, if you want to become a real god of cookery, you have to have a strong heart. Kindness and compassion are the most basic characters. This is a mission to develop your character, and it's not out of line, the system replied calmly. In that case, I'll reluctantly accept this mission. Meg said thoughtfully. He had provided food for the children once before, and sharing delicious food was indeed something that made people happy. Providing a piping hot breakfast for the hungry cleaners, and it was just porridge with pork and century egg, shouldn't be a burden to him. It's okay. I'm not busy now. Meg looked at the old lady with a smile. Give me the bamboo tube. I'll get some water for you. The old lady looked at Meg's kind smile, but she showed some hesitation. It's nothing. My restaurant is just in front. Meg pointed in the direction of Amy's. Then I'll have to trouble you, sir. The old man took out the bamboo tube, poured out all the water inside, and handed it to Meg. The cold bamboo tube still had ice shards in it. In this kind of weather, this kind of container that didn't keep warm at all could turn the hot water into cold water in less than 10 minutes. Meg took the bamboo tube and walked straight to a breakfast shop not far away. How can you trouble him? The old lady looked at old Jack with some resentment. Old Jack laughed dryly and looked at the old lady dotingly. I have to let you eat something. I'll thank that kind sir properly later. Chapter 11:25. Meg came back with a bamboo tube filled with boiling water and 2 portions of steamed cakes made from coarse grain flour. The steamed cakes were the softest food in the breakfast shop. He tried half a piece, and although it didn't melt in his mouth, it was still quite friendly for people who couldn't chew easily. Have something to eat first, and then drink some water. Meg handed the steamed cakes and boiled water to the old lady. No, no, no. We only need water. How can we take your breakfast? The old lady waved her hand repeatedly, and only took the bamboo tube. She smiled and said, with the boiled water, I only need to soak the cakes in the water, and they will be ready to eat in a while. Thank you so much. Yes, thank you so much, sir. We only need boiled water, old Jack said with a smile. Old Jack said with a smile. He swiftly opened the lid and poured the boiling water into the lid of the bamboo tube. He then broke off a few pieces of biscuits and threw them into the water. The steaming hot water quickly melted the biscuits. Meg passed the steamed cake over to them again with a sincere expression, and said, I've already had my breakfast. If this steamed cake gets cold, I won't be able to eat it. I feel like it would be a pity to waste it like this, so please help me eat it. This, old Jack and his wife looked at each other, and their faces revealed a bit of embarrassment. It would be a pity if such a good steamed cake was wasted, but they also felt a bit apologetic about accepting a gift from others for no reason. Meg continued to smile, and said, I bought breakfast for the two of you because I have something to ask of the two of you. If the two of you don't want to accept it, I would be too embarrassed to ask. Sir, what do you want us to help with? Just tell us. If we can help you, we will definitely not refuse, the old lady said with certainty. Then sit down and eat something first, and I will tell you. Meg stuffed the steamed cakes in his hand into the hands of the old lady and old Jack. The two of them saw that they couldn't refuse, and Meg really didn't intend to take it away, so they had no choice but to accept the steamed cakes. Meg looked at the two of them curiously, and asked, I want to know, how many cleaners are there in the Aden Square? A total of 32. I usually see so many during meetings. Old Jack thought for a while, and then looked at Meg strangely. Why are you asking this? The old lady also looked at Meg strangely. Why is this kind gentleman asking about the cleaners? Oh, it's like this. I am the boss of Mamie's over there. I feel that you guys work hard every day to clean the Aden Square, so I would like to provide breakfast to warm your stomachs in this cold winter, Meg said with a smile. Old Jack and the old lady both looked at Meg in shock. Usually, the passers-by wouldn't even look them in the eye, and the restaurants treated them like scourges. They would be chased away if they tried to get close. That was also why they didn't dare to ask for a cup of hot water, food. Mamie restaurant. Old Jack suddenly thought of something, and exclaimed softly. Isn't that the famous restaurant at the end with a long line every day? Oh, it's that restaurant, the old lady said in surprise. During the meetings these days, they often heard people mention that restaurant. They heard that it had taken first place on the Aden Square food ranking, and there were hundreds of customers lining up at the door every day. The food inside cost at least 200 copper coins, and the most expensive one cost 10,000 copper coins. Oh my God! They really didn't dare to imagine what the food that cost 10,000 copper coins looked like. Could it be made of gold? The two of them didn't even earn 10,000 copper coins a year. Yes, it should be the restaurant you were talking about. Meg nodded. He didn't expect Mamie's to be more famous than he thought. You're saying that you're going to provide us with breakfast? Old Jack asked with some uncertainty. This kind of thing was too unbelievable. Yes, I don't know where I can go to see your person in charge. I want to talk to him directly. Meg nodded. The old lady quickly regained her composure. She pointed to a small alley not far away, and said, Our office is on the second floor of that alley. We have a meeting there every day at 9 o'clock. Mr. Sidka, who is in charge of us, will be there at that time. Meg looked in the direction the old lady was pointing at, and smiled. Okay, thank you. Please enjoy your meal. See you later. We should thank you, sir. This is the best breakfast we've ever had, the old lady said gratefully. Meg said goodbye to the two old ladies, and rode his bicycle back to the restaurant. It was best to talk to their person in charge about this kind of thing. In order to avoid some trouble, it was best to identify the name list and all the staff to prevent the phenomenon of impersonation. After all, Meg wasn't running a charity. He wanted to help those in need, not everyone. There was still a long line at the entrance of Mamie's. Harold's family was at the front of the line. Harold looked in the direction of the restaurant's entrance with anticipation. As a person who never ate breakfast, he was completely captivated by the delicious soy milk and youtiao set meal after he tried it for the first time at Mamie's yesterday. Of course, the most important thing was that after eating that breakfast, his stomach didn't hurt at all. There were no symptoms of bloating or acid reflux. After playing with his wife and daughter for a whole day, he felt so refreshed. It was a wonderful feeling. So, without Doris saying anything, he got up early this morning and brought them to Mamie's again to have breakfast together as a family. "Father, can I have an ice cream?" Kathy asked expectantly as she held Harold's hand. Harold shook his head and smiled. "Not today. It's too cold in the morning. Can I bring Kathy here for ice cream when I'm on leave next time?" "Okay." Kathy was slightly disappointed, but she quickly smiled again. "It's so blissful to be able to eat with Father every day." "I feel very blissful too." Harold patted Kathy's head. The little girl had grown so tall in the blink of an eye. He had indeed missed out on too much companionship. He had to spend more time with them in the future. This is such a wonderful restaurant. Doris looked at the father and daughter with a blissful smile on her face. "Mr. Meg, I have to leave. The princess needs me." Phyllis walked up to Meg as soon as he entered the restaurant. She said softly, "Miss Camilla can take over my job now. Even if I leave, it won't affect the restaurant's business too much." Chapter 11:26. Meg looked at Phyllis's determined eyes, and pondered for a moment before nodding. "All right, you've already learned how to make Yangzhou fried rice and braised chicken and rice. You'll be able to make delicious food with just a few changes. It's time for you to go." "Thank you, Mr. Meg." Phyllis bowed deeply to Meg before straightening her body. She blushed slightly, and said, "If I come back after the war, will you still want me?" "Of course. How could I not want an outstanding employee like you?" Meg nodded matter-of-factly. "But why does this sound like a bad flag? Only an outstanding employee." Phyllis was slightly disappointed, but she quickly smiled, and nodded. "Then I'll definitely come back." Meg continued, "I've already asked around about Princess Irina's current location. I'm very impressed by her noble character of fighting for the freedom of ordinary elves. The situation of the night elves shouldn't be too good now, so I'm donating some food in my name. You can go with the food escort team so that you can take care of each other on the way." Food. Phyllis was stunned for a moment, but she quickly understood that the princess was no longer the princess who was loved and worshipped by all elves. The conditions of the night elves must be very difficult, but she didn't think of this at all. Mr. Meg was indeed very thoughtful. Meg nodded, and said, "Yes, Phyllis. Take a rest first. When the morning service is over, I'll bring you to a place. There are some things that I need to discuss personally." Okay. Phyllis nodded hurriedly. She didn't even know where the princess and the others were now. She didn't expect Mr. Meg to do so much for her silently and arrange everything for her. "Phyllis, are you leaving us too?" Yabamiya stepped forward, and held Phyllis's hand reluctantly. "First it was Aisha, then it was Shirley, and now even you are leaving. I really can't bear to part with you. Yeah, are you elves all so busy? Barbara also looked at Phyllis with a perplexed expression. There had never been any wars in the Moon Nation, and all of the residents lived in harmony. Even quarrels and fights were rare. Everyone gathered around Phyllis. Although Phyllis didn't talk much, she had built a good friendship with everyone. They were reluctant to part with her now. I'm going to cook for Her Highness. I'll come back after the war ends. I think Miss Aisha and Miss Shirley will come back too. Phyllis looked at everyone with reddened eyes. Her eyes were also filled with reluctance. Here, she gained friendship for the first time, and received concern other than the princess. What a warm place. If she could, she would like to stay here forever. Let's get ready for business. Meg glanced at his watch and walked towards the kitchen. Meg took off his apron and hung it on the rack. He asked Phyllis to wait for him while he went upstairs to change his clothes. Let's go, Meg said to Phyllis as he came downstairs. Phyllis nodded and followed Meg to the door. Wait. At this moment, Anna's voice sounded from behind. Phyllis turned around. Anna jogged to Phyllis and handed her a little rabbit knitted with white wool. She said softly, Big Sister Phyllis, if you meet Big Sister Shirley, please pass this little rabbit to her for me. Tell her that I'll be waiting for her to come back. Phyllis looked at the plump little rabbit and nodded. All right, I'll give it to her if I meet her. Thank you. Anna's tears were already welling up in her eyes. She threw herself into Phyllis's arms, and choked with sobs. You must come back. Phyllis's eyes also reddened, and she hugged Anna tightly. Phyllis, if you can't hold on any longer, write to me, and I'll bring the Moon Nation's army to help you. Barbara raised her hand, and tried her best to make her expression look as nonchalant as possible. Count me in. Elizabeth raised her hand. I'm useless, but if you need me, I'll definitely come. Yabamiya also raised her hand. Thank you. Phyllis stood up and looked at everyone with a radiant smile. She waved her hand and said, Goodbye, everyone. Meg looked at everyone, and his heart was suddenly filled with warmth. He didn't know when it started, but everyone in the restaurant made him feel like he was part of a big family. They got along well, but they didn't lose their warmth. This was a friendship that he didn't have in his previous life. It had nothing to do with money or status. It was pure and beautiful, and it touched the softest part of his heart. If that day comes, I'll come too. I'll definitely come. Meg said in his heart. Regardless of whether it was Irina, Sally, Shirley, or Phyllis, he couldn't just stand by and watch. Meg pushed the bicycle out with Phyllis. They left the Aden Square and came to the north of the city. They turned into an alley, and after a few turns, they stopped in front of an old courtyard. Give me a moment, Phyllis. Meg walked towards the courtyard, and knocked on the door. 3 long knocks and 2 short knocks. After a while, the door opened a crack, and an eye looked out. When it saw Meg, its eyes lit up, and it pulled the door open. Mr. Mac, you're here. Mond looked at Meg respectfully, and then shouted into the courtyard, Boss, Mr. Mac is here. Let's talk inside. Meg turned around and waved at Phyllis, and then walked into the courtyard. Are they the guests? Phyllis looked at Mond in surprise, and then quickly followed Meg. Mr. Mac, you're here. As soon as Meg entered the courtyard, Sardras, who was topless, came out to welcome him with a smile. When he saw Phyllis, he immediately turned around and ran back to his room. After a while, he put on his clothes and came out. He touched his bald head embarrassedly, and said, I thought you came alone. Meg smiled, and said, Director Sardras, we can start the mission that I talked to you about previously. have you prepared the things that I need? Mr. Mac, the food that you asked me to buy is all ready. It's all loaded in the trucks and parked in the backyard. We can set off at any time after we harness the unicorns. Sargeras brought Meg to the backyard, where more than 20 trucks filled with food were parked. Meg nodded. These food should be enough to get the night elves through this winter. He looked at Sargeras and said, besides these food, Phyllis will also go with us. I hope Director Sargeras can take care of her on the way. Sargeras patted his chest and said, don't worry, leave it to me. As long as I'm alive, I won't let any harm come to Miss Phyllis. It's a long journey, and we might be attacked by the elves. The reward, Sargeras interrupted Meg with a smile, but his tone was very firm, and he said, Mr. Mac, 1,000 holy Rigiamos are already a very generous reward. Besides, you've also prepared Rigiamos for us. Don't worry, we will escort the food and Miss Phyllis safely. Chapter 11:27. Thank you, Burning Legion, Meg said gratefully as he looked at Sargeras. Since Phyllis proposed to look for Irina, he had been preparing for something. Because he hadn't recovered his strength yet, he couldn't provide much support, so he could only provide some help in other aspects, such as preparing food and hiring the Burning Legion to escort them. Based on his understanding of Irina's character, she probably hadn't considered the issue of food before the uprising. Now that the Wind Forest was besieging them, it must be very difficult to obtain food. I didn't expect Mr. Meg to prepare so much for me. I'm so touched. Looking at the trucks in the yard, Phyllis was touched. Her eyes turned red again as she looked at Meg. After talking with Sargeras, Meg turned to Phyllis and took out a small book wrapped in craft paper. He handed it to her. What's this? Phyllis took the book, her heart pounding. Does Mr. Meg have something to say to me? If so, Phyllis, I'll do it. Phyllis almost blurted out. She suddenly realized that she seemed to have snatched the book, and her face turned red. You'll do it? Meg raised an eyebrow. He didn't know what Phyllis was talking about, and why she was blushing all of a sudden. He continued, Phyllis, this is a book on the art of war that I came across by chance. I think it's very well written. You can give it to your princess, perhaps it'll be of some help to her. Give it to Her Highness. Phyllis was stunned. So this wasn't a gift from Mr. Meg, and Phyllis was a little disappointed. Her face turned even redder. She nodded and said, oh okay, I'll give it to Her Highness. War is very dangerous. Be careful after this farewell. This knife is my gift to you. There will always be a place for you in the restaurant. Come back when the war is over. Meg took out a Chinese cleaver from the satchel at his waist and handed it to Phyllis. Boss, this is your own kitchen knife, Phyllis said in surprise as she took the kitchen knife with both hands. She was familiar with the texture and weight of the knife. Meg smiled. Now it belongs to you. Thank you, boss. Phyllis smiled. Well then, goodbye. Meg said to Phyllis with a smile as he looked at the members of the Burning Legion who had harnessed their unicorns and were looking at them. Goodbye, boss. Phyllis waved at Meg, then turned around and ran towards the train. Meg stood at the entrance and watched the long line of cars slowly drive away. He stood in the empty alley for a while before he turned around and rode off on his bicycle. In this war where there was a great disparity in strength, perhaps only Taizu's practical results could be used as a theoretical support. He had to hurry up and improve his strength. Otherwise, no matter how many backup plans he had prepared, he would still be lacking a little. When Meg rode his bicycle to the Aiden Square cleaning department, they were about to leave after the morning meeting. Meg knocked on the door, and the 30-odd middle-aged cleaners and the young man standing at the front of the room all turned to look at him. Sorry to disturb you. I am the boss of Mamie's, Meg. I have something to discuss with everyone. May I come in? Meg asked with a smile. Oh, it's that kind, sir. The old lady's eyes lit up, and she poked old Jack, who was dozing off beside her. Mr. Meg. Old Jack opened his eyes in a daze, and his eyes lit up when he saw Meg standing at the door. He smiled and waved at him. Then, he turned to the young man sitting in front, and said, Mr. Sitka, this is the kind sir I told you about just now. Old Jack, is he the kind sir who bought breakfast for you this morning? You just said that he was going to prepare a hot breakfast for us. Is it really Mamie's? I heard that restaurant is super expensive. The cleaners began to whisper among themselves upon hearing that. They looked at Mag curiously. This was the first time something like this had happened. If they could have a hot breakfast every morning, that would be too blissful. Sitka stood up when he heard that. His square face was full of smiles. He looked at Meg and said, Mr. Meg, please come in. Old Jack mentioned you to me just now. I didn't expect you to really come. Mamie's had been in the limelight recently. Of course, he had heard about it. The cleaning department was under the management of the city lord's mansion. Although he was in charge of the Aden Square area and had 30-odd cleaners under him, he was just an ordinary employee. The cleaners were generally recruited for the old people who couldn't do heavy labor and had no children to support them. Their work efficiency was extremely low, and their salary was only enough to keep them fed. However, this was already a huge financial expense for the city lord's mansion. There was no way to continue improving the living conditions of these old people. Therefore, although he knew that these old people didn't have it easy, especially on winter mornings, they had to work in the cold while eating cold food. Every winter, a few old people would pass away. With an ordinary salary and a family to support, he couldn't do anything. Therefore, when he heard that someone was going to provide breakfast for these cleaners this morning, he was pleasantly surprised. When he heard that this person was the owner of Mamie's, he was even more shocked. Recently, there were too many rumors about Mamie's in the city lord's mansion. The waitresses there were all first-class beauties. The city lord was a frequent customer of that restaurant. The important meeting between the three clans was held there. It was said that a prisoner escaped from Bawtai prison yesterday. In the end, he didn't run after escaping, but turned around and entered Mamie's. Any one of these rumors was shocking, not to mention that they all came from the same restaurant. Hello, Mr. Sitka. Hello, everyone. Meg walked in with a smile. It seemed like the two old people had already helped him with the promotion. It's like this. I saw that everyone has to start cleaning so early in the morning, and the weather has been so cold recently. Therefore, I want to provide breakfast for everyone. It may not be sumptuous, but I hope it can give everyone some warmth. Meg went straight to the point. That's great. This is really a good thing. Yes, Mr. Meg is really a good person. We don't have to eat breakfast that is like ice cubes anymore. As soon as Meg finished speaking, there was a round of enthusiastic applause below. Mr. Meg, I thank you on behalf of the Aden Square cleaners. Sitka shook Meg's hand with a face full of gratitude. Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 1128. Ding! Congratulations to the host for completing the mission of delivering a warm winter breakfast to the cleaners. You have received a reward, a recipe for congee with pork and century egg. On the road to becoming the god of cookery, your temperament has been improved and sharpened. At the same time, you have received a good person card. Collecting 5 good person cards will give you a chance to make a wish, the system's voice sounded. A chance to make a wish. What's that? Meg was slightly stunned and asked curiously. A chance to make a wish. The host can make a wish to the system, and the system will try its best to fulfill it. Then how do I get the good person card? Meg continued to ask. This chance to make a wish sounded very good. As long as the host does good deeds, there is a certain chance to get the good person card. That's really a good person card. Meg curled his lips. It didn't sound very reliable. God knows how many good deeds he had to do to get 5 good person cards. Looking at the shiny recipe for the congee with pork and century egg that appeared in his mind, this was probably the easiest task he had ever done. However, the task had already begun, and the responsibility had just begun. Providing the cleaners with a steaming hot breakfast every day was something that needed to be persisted for a long time. Everyone is too polite. From tomorrow morning onwards, please come to Mamie's entrance at 6:30 a.m. I will provide a free breakfast for everyone, Meg said to everyone with a smile. Everyone praised Meg again. Mr. Sitka, can you give me a list of everyone's names, and then let me get to know everyone? In order to prevent other people from sneaking in and causing people to not be able to eat breakfast, I want to do a simple introduction, Meg said to Sitka while looking at him. Of course, Mr. Meg is indeed very thoughtful. Sitka nodded and walked quickly to his desk. He pulled out a list from a pile of messy papers and handed it to Meg. At the same time, he began to introduce the names to Meg one by one. Okay, thank you. Meg kept the list. He had already memorized everyone's names. This way, he didn't have to worry about other people sneaking in for the free breakfast. Then, I will take my leave first. Meg nodded slightly to old Jack and his wife, and then left. He had to go back and prepare some things. This Meg is really a good person. Yeah, I heard that the cheapest food in that restaurant costs at least 200 copper coins. I have never eaten such expensive food before. After Meg left, the cleaners were still discussing with expectant smiles on their faces. All right, everyone is dismissed. Go back and rest, Sitka said. Everyone dispersed. Meg returned to the restaurant. Yabamiya and the others had most likely gone to the ice cream shop, leaving Anna crouched in front of the floor-to-ceiling window with Ugly Duckling in her arms as she looked outside in a daze. Meg stood to the side and watched for a while. Then he slowly walked over and squatted down beside Anna. He whispered, Anna, what are you thinking about? I'm wondering if Shirley and big sister Aisha will meet on the battlefield. Anna turned to look at Meg with a worried expression. If they meet, will one of them die? They won't. Meg shook his head with a smile. No matter if it's Aisha or Shirley, they won't hurt each other, even if they really stand on opposite sides. After all, they have fought side by side. Anna thought for a while, and a smile appeared on her face. She nodded and said, they are both very kind elves, and also real elves. All right, let's not sit here and daydream. I'll teach you how to make Yangzhou fried rice today, okay? Meg said with a smile as he placed his big hand on Anna's head gently. Really? Anna's eyes lit up. She had been practicing her knife skills these days, and she had never cooked before. Of course. Anna's knife skills are already very good. She can cut the ingredients into the required size for fried rice. It's time to start learning how to cook. Meg nodded, and then he mentally purchased a set of cooking utensils suitable for Anna from the system. The wok provided by the system was half the size of a normal wok. It looked a little mini, but it was still a big wok for Anna. The spatula was also a size smaller. Even Anna's small hands could easily hold it, and she didn't need to use much effort. Anna moved a small stool over and stood on it, just enough to reach the height of the stove. She looked at Meg expectantly. She had to watch Uncle Meg make hundreds of plates of Yangzhou fried rice every day. Every step and detail was deeply imprinted in her heart, but she didn't have the chance to practice. Now, she could finally try to make a plate of Yangzhou fried rice that belonged to her. Yangzhou fried rice is a very complicated dish. There are very strict requirements regarding the control of the fire and the timing of adding the ingredients. Let's start with the ingredients. Meg took out 2 sets of ingredients from the fridge, gave one to Anna, and held the other for himself. He started to teach her attentively. Anna stared at Meg without blinking. Although she had seen the same steps thousands of times, she still didn't want to miss any details. She remembered every word that Meg said in her heart. A plate of Yangzhou fried rice that looked, smelled, and tasted good was soon out of the wok. Okay, Anna, you can start cooking for the first time. Meg put the plate of Yangzhou fried rice aside and said with a smile. Okay. Anna nodded. She glanced at Meg, then withdrew her gaze. She stood in front of the chopping table for a while with her eyes closed. Then she opened her eyes again and picked up the Chinese kitchen knife. Her small hands held the broad Chinese kitchen knife, but it didn't feel cumbersome at all. The knife fell on the chopping board, making a rhythmic sound. The ingredients were reduced to the size of rice grains one by one under the knife. Then Anna put them on a plate for later use. She turned on the fire, poured the oil, and put the ingredients into the wok with the right temperature. She stir-fried and tossed the wok. Everything was done smoothly. It was obviously Anna's first time cooking, but her performance amazed Meg. It didn't seem like something a 6 or 7-year-old child could do. This child is really talented. Meg couldn't help but praise her in his heart. She would definitely become a better chef than him in the future. Anna turned off the fire and took the first plate of Yangzhou fried rice out of the wok. She carefully brought it over and put it next to Meg's plate. She looked at Meg expectantly and said, "Uncle Meg, try it. A plate of Yangzhou fried rice that is burnt." When the 2 plates of Yangzhou fried rice were put together, the difference in appearance became very obvious. In Anna's plate, the winter bamboo shoots and tree mushrooms were burnt yellow. The eggs weren't perfectly wrapped around the rice, and many of them were damaged. The oil was too shiny. The amount of oil used was a bit too much. Okay, I'll try it. Meg picked up the spoon and put a spoonful of Yangzhou fried rice into his mouth. The salty taste almost made him spit it out. The salt wasn't evenly fried, so the burnt taste was very obvious. Chapter 11:29. This was a Yangzhou fried rice that was full of flaws. However, this was also the first time that Anna had cooked Yangzhou fried rice with a spoon. Meg swallowed the fried rice and gave her a thumbs up with a smile. Overall, it's not bad. However, there's still a lot of room for improvement in the control of the fire, the technique, and the use of salt. However, it's already very impressive for Anna to be able to do this for the first time. It seems that there are still many flaws. However, I'll continue to work hard. Anna nodded with a happy smile on her face. Anna, wait for me here for a while. We'll go to the market later and buy some ingredients for you to practice. Meg reached out and touched Anna's head. Then, he turned around and went upstairs. Tapping on the glittering recipe in his mind, a stream of information flowed directly into his mind. Congee with pork and century egg. It wasn't a complicated congee, but it was delicious enough. Cooking the congee itself wasn't a complicated job. However, making the delicious century egg was the most difficult process in this dish. Century egg was also known as century egg. It could be considered as a kind of dark Eastern cuisine. Meg had an average impression of century egg. He didn't like it very much, but he didn't hate it either. If he could come across a plate of salad with century egg that tasted good, he would still eat a few pieces. According to the usual method, it would take about 30 days to make century egg. After the system's upgrade process and the modification of the cooking utensils, the curing time of Century Egg was shortened from 30 days to 3 days. However, in this way, even if Meg learned how to make congee with pork and Century Egg tonight, he still wouldn't be able to present a bowl of piping hot congee with pork and Century Egg to the cleaners tomorrow morning due to the lack of ingredients. System, are you digging a hole for me? Can congee with pork and Century Egg without Century Egg still be called congee with pork and Century Egg? Meg rolled his eyes and said, Host, please don't worry. As long as the host can learn how to cook congee with pork and Century Egg, the system has already prepared the Century Egg you need for 3 days. It won't affect the sales, the system replied. What kind of egg are you using? How much is a Century Egg? Meg continued to ask. The system uses the duck eggs of the Kashmir duck from the Morning Light Lake in the northwest of the Twilight Forest. The Kashmir duck is a level 3 magical beast. It feeds on fish and its eggs are rich in nutrients. It tastes sweet and cool and has the effect of nourishing yin and clearing the lungs. It lays only 1 egg per month and the quantity is extremely small. The Century Eggs made by this system are made from the yellow soil of Vic Mountain and the ashes from the rice that was irrigated by the water of life. All right, just tell me the price. Meg rolled his eyes. The price of a Century Egg as an ingredient is 200 copper coins. A Century Egg can be used to cook 4 bowls of congee with pork and Century Egg, the system replied. Meg thought for a while and asked, System, if I use ordinary duck eggs and materials that are relatively easy to obtain to make Century Eggs, what's the cost of 1 Century Egg? Host, as a candidate for the god of cookery, it's the most basic character to use the most perfect ingredients to cook delicious food for the customers. In the case where there are excellent ingredients to choose from, how can you use ordinary ingredients to make up the numbers? This is not in line with the identity and taste of the god of cookery. First of all, I'm an owner who needs to consider the profits of the restaurant. While doing good deeds, I have to control the investment cost and prevent the restaurant from being exposed to risks because of my personal feelings and actions. This is a sign of having a brain that has nothing to do with identity and taste, Meg calmly interrupted the system. However, using ordinary ingredients can't perfectly display the deliciousness of this dish. It's not in line with the host's ability as a candidate for the god of cookery. It's not conducive to building the reputation of the god of cookery, the system insisted. I'll use ordinary ingredients and the most sincere cooking skills to serve a bowl of congee with pork and Century Egg to these hardworking cleaners. The purpose is not to start a journey of gourmet food for them, but to let them work continuously in the cold for a few hours so that they can have a bowl of piping hot and delicious congee. This will make it easier for them to get through this cold winter. System, you're neglecting the essentials and focusing on the details. You haven't grasped the real point. Meg pursed his lips mockingly, and then directly said, Prepare 33 servings of ordinary Century Eggs for me. The market price of an ordinary duck egg is 2 copper coins each. I'll charge you 5 copper coins for the processing fee, and I'll give you 3 copper coins for the consumption. 1 ordinary Century Egg will be 10 copper coins. Host, it's settled then. Meg calmly interrupted the system and continued, For the congee with pork and Century Eggs sold in the restaurant, I'll get the best Century Egg from you. You'll be responsible for the supply of ordinary Century Eggs in the future. The order is stable, the price is fair, and the profit margin is more than 5 times. This kind of business, if you miss this village, there won't be such a shop again, Meg said with a smile. I'll do it. The system almost blurted out. The corners of Meg's mouth curled up slightly. After confirming the ingredients in his mind, he turned around and went downstairs with a basket of vegetables. He brought Anna out to buy ingredients. Learning to cook required a large amount of ingredients. The cost of ingredients in the fridge was too high, so Meg planned to let Anna practice with ordinary ingredients first, just like Phyllis did previously. What he wanted to buy were the ingredients needed to make breakfast for the cleaners tomorrow morning. Reducing the cost of doing good deeds was the way to go in the long run. Meg's money didn't fall from the sky. He still had his own standards for doing things at different stages. 100 duck eggs, 2 bags of good quality pearl rice, a piece of lean meat, and various ingredients needed to make century eggs. When they came out of the market, Meg's basket was already filled with various ingredients. Send the rice to Amy's in half an hour, Meg said to the rice shop owner who was loading the cart. He carried the basket and took Anna to a building material store not far from the market. After buying some yellow soil and plant ash, they returned to the restaurant. Uncle Meg, are you planting flowers? Anna asked curiously as she looked at Meg, who put down the yellow soil and plant ash and other things. No, I'm planning to make a dish called century eggs. Meg shook his head and put the things behind the cabinet. He had to wait until he entered the test field for the god of cookery tonight before he could start making century eggs. Century eggs. Anna thought for a while. She had never heard of this dish. However, she had never heard of any of the dishes that Uncle Meg made, but they always brought her surprises. Anna, if you want to continue practicing, you can use these ingredients first. When you can make Yangzhou fried rice to my satisfaction, you can use the ingredients in the fridge. Meg took out the ingredients that belonged to Anna and put them on the cutting table with a smile. Chapter 11:30. Moreton Manor, in a quaint study room. Cyril stood and looked at Geoffrey, who was bent over a report. He said carefully, "Father, the matter of letting Gloria become a director of the Chamber of Commerce has caused a lot of dissatisfaction and discussion among the directors. Do you think we should give an explanation to the directors and remove Gloria from her position to appease the directors?" Dissatisfaction. Geoffrey raised his head and looked at Cyril with some mockery. "Since when do I need to look at other people's faces when making decisions? Besides, who else would be dissatisfied with this matter other than you?" Cyril's lips trembled and he slowly clenched his fist. He steeled his heart and looked at Geoffrey. "President, Gloria is only a woman after all. You only have one son left. If you continue to support Gloria and make me a joke, who will inherit family Moreton and the Aden Chamber of Commerce in the future? Are you really willing to hand over the family to a woman who will be married off in the future? You." Geoffrey slammed the report in his hand on the table. He looked at the fearless Cyril, who was staring straight at him. This unfilial thing actually dared to speak to him like this. Blood rushed to his head and he suddenly felt dizzy. Cyril was initially still a little fearful, but upon seeing Geoffrey's reaction, he was no longer fearful. A cold smile appeared on his face as he said, "Father, there's no way that Big Brother is going to inherit the family fortune. Family Moreton is such a big family property. If you don't want to see it fall into someone else's hands, then you should train me well. Only I can make family Moreton prosper. Get out. Get out." Geoffrey picked up the report on the table and threw it at Cyril. Cyril dodged to the side and looked at Cyril, who was lying on the chair with his eyes closed. He bent down to pick up the report and put it back on the table. He smiled and said, "Since Father is not feeling well, then I will take my leave. The Chamber of Commerce's year-end banquet is in a few days. I will propose to the board of directors that Gloria be kicked out of the board on that day." After that, Cyril didn't wait for Geoffrey to get angry and quickly walked out of the door. Geoffrey fumbled for a small bottle from the drawer and opened the cap with trembling hands. He raised his head and took a big gulp. After a while, he let out a long sigh. His flushed face gradually receded and he opened his eyes. His usually wise and dignified eyes were now filled with a trace of loneliness. Was I really in the wrong all those years ago? Geoffrey looked out the window in a daze. In order to make Lance inherit the family business, he had forced him to do many things. In the end, Lance gave up his right to inherit the family business and became a teacher at Chaos School. During all these years, in order to ensure that family Moreton could continue to prosper, he had always been nurturing Cyril. He had placed a lot of hope on him and viewed him as his only successor. With this identity, he naturally had nothing to fear. He ate, drank, and played, and didn't pay any attention to the management of the company. Do I really have no choice but to hand over the family business to this kid? Jeffrey's brows furrowed as his heart wavered slightly. A figure then appeared in his mind. Gloria. Jeffrey murmured to himself as he tapped his knuckles on the table. This little girl's recent performance had indeed surprised him. She had been able to turn the suede textile shop, which had been incurring losses for several years, into a profit so quickly. This was something that he didn't expect. Prior to today, he had never seriously considered handing over the family Moreton to Gloria. Ha, I'm still alive, and you dare to provoke me. Jeffrey's expression became serious again as he chuckled coldly. If that old geezer Ian can hand over the Buffett family to that little girl, Hill, then do you think I won't hand over the Moreton family to Gloria? Instead of handing it over to that wastrel to wreak havoc in the family, why not hand it over to Gloria, who's more capable? That little girl is very meticulous and has good aptitude. With some nurturing, she won't be inferior to Lance. Menard, Jeffrey yelled toward the door. Menard pushed open the door and walked in. Go get Mars, Jeffrey instructed. Yes, Menard replied in a respectful manner before quickly departing. Mr. Cyril, did the conversation with the old man go well? A middle-aged man stood in the pavilion of the Moreton Manor and smiled as he looked at Cyril, who was walking briskly toward him. Just as family head Bowen expected. Although the old man was very angry, he only told me to get lost. It seems that he really didn't want to hand over the Moreton family and the Aden Chamber of Commerce to Gloria. Cyril chuckled in a carefree manner. He had been living under Jeffrey's thumb for so many years, and he was finally able to hold his head high for once. Family head Jeffrey has mocked old man Ian's decision to hand the Buffett family over to Mr. Hill more than once. How could he hand over the family business to a daughter, especially a granddaughter of a generation? The position of the head of family Moreton will definitely be yours, Mr. Cyril, Bowen said with a smile, as if he had expected this. Cyril's face was full of joy as he looked at Bowen and said, Family head Bowen, you promised to help me fight for the position of the head of the family. The first step is to remove Gloria from her position at the year-end banquet. Will there be any problems with this? Don't worry. The Marquis family and the Dodges family still have some influence in the Chamber of Commerce. Everyone knows that you will be the head of family Moreton sooner or later. How could the directors not agree to your request? When the time comes, as long as half of the directors vote to remove Gloria, even the chairman won't be able to stop it. Bowen stroked his beard as he looked at Cyril and said, however, after this is done, what Mr. Cyril promised, don't worry, family head Bowen. As long as I can inherit family Moreton's business and become the head of the family, I will definitely help you become the chairman of the Chamber of Commerce in the next election, Cyril said with a nod. Very good. Mr. Cyril is indeed a smart person. Then I will make a trip to the Dodges family now. Boar's smile became even brighter as he bid farewell and left. Father, why should we help Cyril? He is the most dishonest person. His words can't be trusted. In the luxurious carriage, a young man looked at Bowen with a puzzled expression. Cyril is just an idiot who can't be helped. As long as he becomes the head of family Moreton, this fat piece of meat will be eaten up by us sooner or later. Since that's the case, why don't we help him? Bowen sneered. One shear is enough. If there's another Gloria, then our Marquis family really won't be able to make a name for themselves. Chapter 1131. Mr. Meg. When it was close to noon, there was a knock on the door and Gina's voice. Meg opened the door, and Gina and Elizabeth came in empty-handed. "Gina, didn't you go to get the shark's fin?" Meg looked outside the door. There were no shark's fin outside either. "Mr. Meg, you are really Alex's benefactor." Gina pounced on Meg excitedly, and wrapped her legs around him naturally like an octopus. "Ha!" Meg looked at Gina, who was hugging him tightly with an agitated expression, and was a little confused. The nether sharks that invaded Lantist were all killed by the warriors of Lantist with the help of the divine weapon you gave them. The rest of them have been locked up in the fishery according to your request and have entered captivity mode. The invasion of the nether sharks this time did not cause any casualties among the merfolk, and none of the cities were seriously damaged because of the nether sharks. All of this is because of you. Gina looked up at Meg as if she was looking at a god that she worshipped. "Is that so? That's great." Meg's eyes lit up when he heard that. It was a good thing that the merfolk of Lantist could not be harmed by the nether sharks, and the successful establishment of the deep-sea fishery also indicated the successful establishment of the nether shark's fin and shark's lip supply chain. How did he do it? How did he manage to subdue such a powerful magical beast so easily and solve a problem that a powerful tribe could not solve for thousands of years? Elizabeth looked at Meg curiously as if she was meeting him for the first time. She originally thought that he was just an ordinary human chef who came to work at Amy's only because of Mia's invitation. But now, she felt that Meg did not seem like an ordinary person. Whether it was his usual calmness when facing all kinds of powerful guests, or the negotiation with the high priest of Lantist on the surface of the sea, it all showed that he was different from the rest. There seemed to be many special abilities hidden in this man that kept surprising and making people curious. "But, where is the shark's fin?" Meg asked Gina. "Oh." Gina quickly let go of Meg and took out a small blue crystal ball. She smiled and said, "Because there were too many shark fins, I couldn't bring them back. Therefore, the High Priestess gave me the sub-ball of the mother-child crystal ball to store the shark fins and lips." Meg looked at the marble-sized crystal ball in Gina's hand. The dark blue color looked like it contained an ocean. It was indeed similar to the large crystal ball in the hands of the High Priest last time, but it was much smaller. It looked like it was a spatial artifact. "A lot. How many are there?" Meg asked. Gina thought for a moment and said, "There are about 500 of them. If I release them, they can fill up the entire kitchen." Meg observed 3 seconds of silence for the nether sharks. Then, he looked at Gina and said, "Then release 50 servings first. I need to dry them. I still have to make 2 servings of Buddha jumps over the wall today. I'm here for work." Camilla pushed the door open and entered. She glanced at everyone and greeted them casually. Then, she walked straight to the kitchen. When she saw that there was no one in the kitchen, she turned back to look at Meg in surprise. "Where is Miss Phyllis? The lady who told me to cut the vegetables." Meg looked at Camilla and said, "She has already left. From today onwards, you will be in charge of the food preparation work. Title, Beginner's Stool." "Left? Left?" Camilla was stunned. She pointed at the list of ingredients at the side and raised her voice. "Doesn't that mean that I have to cut all these vegetables by myself?" Meg said nonchalantly, "This is Phyllis's daily job. If you find it difficult, I can take care of part of it." Camilla waved her hand and said confidently, There's no need for that. How can I not complete such a simple job?" Meg glanced at his watch and said with a smile, "There's still an hour before business starts. Then, you can start first." Camilla snorted and went upstairs to change into her chef's uniform. She quickly entered the restaurant and equipped 10 knives. Then, she began to cut the ingredients. Starting tomorrow morning, our restaurant will provide breakfast for the cleaners for free. Meg announced during lunch. Providing breakfast for free. Does that mean we won't charge you? Yabamiya was a little surprised. Everyone else also looked at Meg. With the price of Mamie's dishes, that was not a small sum of money. Meg nodded slightly and said, those cleaners have to start work at 4 in the morning. The weather is so cold, but they can only eat breakfast that is as cold as ice. They can't even drink a sip of hot water. I felt that we should do something, so I went to talk to the person in charge about providing breakfast for them. At least until the end of this winter. They are so pitiful. Last time, I saw an old man fall into the snow. Luckily, I managed to dodge in time. The uncle next to him helped him to the hospital. After that, I never saw him again. Amy said with pity. Meg looked at Amy in surprise. He did not expect that he was so close to bankruptcy. Boss, when will the breakfast be provided? Will it be the same as the restaurant's business hours? Yabamiya asked. Meg shook his head and said, no, the agreed time is 7 in the morning every day. However, I will take care of this matter. You don't have to worry about it. The business hours will not change. Boss, you are really a good person. Yabamiya gave Meg a thumbs up and said with a smile, then, starting tomorrow morning, I will come to the restaurant earlier. This guy, is he purposely increasing his favorability? Those humans who sweep the floor are not slaves. It's just a job. What's so pitiful about them? Camilla looked at Meg and pursed her lips with disdain. Humans just like to make a mountain out of a molehill. My business hours are the same as Mia's, Elizabeth said coldly. Barbara blinked and said, since you are all here, then I will sleep a little longer. The blankets in winter are too comfortable. I don't want to get out of bed at all. I will wake up early. Gina raised her hand and said word by word in the common language of the continent. Then, she gave Meg a big smile. I will also wake up early. Anna raised her little hand and said as well. Amy thought for a while, and seriously said, if you are all going to wake up early, then I will have to help you all sleep a little longer. Otherwise, you will be tired during the day. Meow. Ugly Duckling put its 2 front paws on Amy's stool and meowed at her. It's okay, Ugly Duckling. I will help you sleep in your portion, too. Just wake up early, Amy consoled. Chapter 1132. Outside Mamie's, a bald middle-aged man looked at Sith agitatedly, and said, Boss, submit the letter of challenge and issue a challenge to Mamie's. Our restaurant's business has doubled during this period, and our new customers are full of praise. The first place on the soup chart should belong to us. It's almost business hours now. It's not very good to submit a letter of challenge at this time. The owner of Sith Restaurant, who was wearing a black chef's suit, held a letter of challenge in his hand with a hesitant expression. The bald middle-aged man shook his head, and said, No, there are so many customers here. They can be witnesses, and we have to tell everyone that our Sith Restaurant's freshwater seafood soup is the real first place on the soup chart. Only then can the Food Association re-rank it. There are so many customers here, and they're still deceived by the wrong ranking on the delicious cuisine chart. This is a ranking that belongs to us. These customers should be queuing outside Sith Restaurant. Boss, shouldn't we fight for our rights and make a sound? Sith looked at the hundreds of people queuing outside Mamie's and fell silent. Although Sith Restaurant's business was also very good now, it was still a far cry from Mamie's. If Sith Restaurant's business could reach this level, then he would have reached the peak of his life. Alright, let's go and submit the letter of challenge now. We'll have a fair duel to decide who's the real first place on the soup chart. Sith's gaze became determined, and he walked straight to Mamie's. The bald man quickly followed after him. Who are they? Are they here to cut the queue? The customers in the long queue looked curiously at the two people walking straight to the restaurant's entrance. If I remember correctly, isn't that the owner of Sith Restaurant? What's he doing here? Sith Restaurant's freshwater seafood soup is not bad. It's quite delicious. Yes, they're freshly caught freshwater seafood. The ingredients are solid, and the quantity is not small. Just the soup alone is indeed one of the rare delicacies in Chaos City. Very soon, some people in the queue recognized Sith and started discussing. Sith came to the restaurant's door and was about to knock. The bell on the door rang, and the door opened from the inside. Meg opened the door and saw a middle-aged man in a black chef's uniform with his hand raised. He asked curiously, "Excuse me, is there anything I can help you with?" "Hello, Mr. Meg. I am the owner and head chef of Sith Restaurant, Sith." Sith extended his hand towards Meg. "Hello, Boss Sith." Meg reached out and shook his hand. He remembered that the freshwater seafood soup, which was ranked second on the soup rankings, came from Sith Restaurant. This Boss Sith had rushed over aggressively, and it didn't seem like he was here to eat. Sith retracted his hand, looked at Meg, and went straight to the point. "First of all, congratulations to your restaurant for dominating the 6 rankings in the last Delicious Cuisine ranking. Today, I'm here to challenge you for the first place of the soup ranking. Your braised chicken and rice is indeed excellent, but I also think that my ancestral freshwater seafood soup is not inferior to any other soup. Therefore, I want to have a duel with you to determine the real number 1 on the soup list." "Oh, so you're here to challenge me." Meg understood. Speaking of which, ever since he defeated the head chef of Dukas Restaurant, his reputation had spread far and wide. He hadn't been provoked or challenged for a while. He didn't expect someone to challenge him after dominating the 6 rankings. It really surprised him. "Yes, this is the letter of challenge. Please accept it, Mr. Meg." Sith handed over the letter of challenge in his hand. Meg hesitated for a moment, then reached out to take the letter of challenge. He didn't have a bad impression of this Boss Sith. People with skills would more or less have some pride. The first and second places were natural opponents. If they couldn't accept it, a duel would happen sooner or later. He glanced at the letter of challenge. It was similar to what Sith had said before. With soup as the theme of the duel, a famous gourmet and the president of the Food Association would be invited to be the judges for a professional duel. And the wager was the number 1 on the soup rankings. To be honest, Meg didn't like this kind of meaningless challenge. However, if he were to decline, it would inevitably weaken his prestige. He couldn't help but think about it for a while. Wow, he's actually here to challenge Mr. Mac. This Boss Sith is a little stubborn, isn't he? The duel between the first and second places on the soup rankings feels like it'll be a very exciting duel. Speaking of which, after the Buddha jumps over the wall was born, are there any other soups? If nothing goes wrong, it'll probably be a one-sided battle, right? When the customers heard Sith's words, they immediately started discussing. The bald middle-aged man behind Sith looked at Mag and sarcastically said, "Could it be that you are scared? If you don't dare to accept the challenge, as long as you explain it to the Food Association and ask them to change the soup rankings so that Sith Restaurant's freshwater seafood soup is ranked first, we won't force you to do anything." Sith looked at the bald man with some displeasure. However, this matter concerned the future of Sith Restaurant, so he didn't say anything. He looked at Meg and waited for his answer. Meg looked at the bald man and smiled slightly. He folded the letter of challenge and smiled at Sith. "Since Boss Sith has invited me so kindly, I'll accept this letter of challenge." However, you're the one who issued the challenge, and you're the one who set the rules. I'll decide the time and place. That shouldn't be a problem, right? Sith was a little surprised by Meg's straightforwardness. He thought for a while and nodded. Then the time will be set at 4:30 p.m. tonight. The duel will take place in front of Mamie's. My restaurant will open for business at 5 p.m. sharp, so I'll have to ask Boss Sith to start cooking earlier. Oh, right. There's one more thing I have to say in advance. The braised chicken and rice from before has been classified as a staple dish by me. I just released a soup called a Buddha Jumps Over the Wall yesterday. Because this soup takes up to a day to cook, I won't be cooking it on the spot. I'll be making the finished product directly. I hope everyone knows. Meg continued. A newly released soup. Sith was even more surprised. The braised chicken soup from before had already been approved by the Food Association. He didn't expect Meg to abandon it and prepare a newly released soup to duel with him. Oh, about the wager, other than the first place on the soup rankings, I'd like to increase it a little, Meg said again. Sith looked at Meg with some vigilance and asked, increase what? The loser has to pay 10,000 copper coins, Meg said with a smile. Chapter 1133. Wow! Mr. Mac accepted the challenge. Looks like I'll have to ask the boss for leave tonight to watch the duel. I usually line up at this time. Looks like I'll be able to watch a good show for free today. Is anyone betting? I'm betting on Mr. Mac. No idiot would bet on a duel without any suspense. The customers were getting excited when they saw Meg accept the challenge. 10,000 copper coins. Sith was stunned. He thought that Meg would raise a big bet. After all, the owner of Ricky's rotisserie lost the entire rotisserie to Mr. Mac when they dueled. He didn't expect that Meg would only raise the bet to 10,000 copper coins. Looks like this guy is really scared. The bald man looked at Meg with disdain. His eyes were burning with passion. As an old employee of Sith's restaurant, he was waiting for the freshwater seafood soup to reach first place. Then, he would flatter the boss and open a new restaurant. When that happened, he would be the best choice for the new restaurant's manager. And the freshwater seafood soup recipe that had been in the boss's hands would probably be passed on to him, right? Yes, 10,000 copper coins. Meg nodded. Okay, I accept. Sith thought for a moment and nodded. I accept the challenge. Mr. Sith, please go ahead. I'm going to open for business. Meg put away the challenge and opened the door. He stepped aside and smiled. Welcome, Mamie's. Mr. Mac, do you need my help? Crassus looked at Sith when he walked to the door. I can help too. Amy came forward, eager to try. That won't be necessary. Meg hurriedly said. He was a little afraid that Crassus and Amy would kill the two of them with a fireball. That would be too cruel. Good luck, Mr. Meg. Gloria stopped when she reached the door. She clenched her little fist and encouraged him with a smile. What right does this guy have to make my lovely Miss Gloria smile? Camilla stood in the corner and looked at Meg with resentment. She gritted her teeth and said, there is no true love between the opposite sex. Thank you. Meg nodded with a smile. Inexplicably, he felt a chill down his spine. Meg greeted the regulars familiarly and ignored Sith. This unreasonable guy. The bald man was a little annoyed and wanted to go forward to reason. That's enough. He's already shown enough self-restraint and magnanimity. If it were me, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to do that. Sith interrupted the bald man's words and took a deep look at Meg. Although this man was young, his calmness made him a little uneasy. Let's go to the Food Association first and visit a few gourmets. All right. The bald man retracted his gaze unwillingly and turned to catch up with Sith. Mr. Mac, is there still no news about Miss Shirley? Perhaps she wrote you a letter. Constantine asked expectantly as he came in front of Meg. Meg looked at Constantine and was a little shocked. This eligible bachelor who always paid attention to his appearance and even combed his hair meticulously had lost a lot of weight in just a few days. His black eyes were sunken and bloodshot. His hair was messy, and his beard was unkempt. He looked just like a tramp. She didn't send us a letter. Meg shook his head. However, looking at Constantine's appearance, he couldn't bear it. Why did he have such a one-sided love? Moreover, the other party might take out something bigger than him. There's still no news. Constantine seemed to have lost all his strength. His body swayed, and he barely managed to stand up by grabbing onto the door frame at the side. I hate it so much. I hate that I didn't have the courage to confess my feelings to her in time. I only understood how important she was to me after I lost her. Constantine was already sobbing with tears streaming down his face. What an infatuated man. Yes. There aren't many good men like him nowadays. Many of the regulars had an impression of Constantine. During this period, he often came to ask about Shirley. The regulars naturally remembered that beautiful and quiet elf attendant. They couldn't help but sigh when they saw Constantine like this. Constantine, male, 33 years old. Due to lovesickness, severe insomnia, loss of appetite, rapid decline of bodily functions, and extremely poor immunity. If this state continues, his life will be in danger. Is this guy Liang Shanbua? He can even get lovesickness. Meg raised his eyebrows as he looked at the test results given by the omniscient door. It seemed like Shirley's sudden departure was a big blow to Constantine. After thinking for a while, he looked at the heartbroken Constantine, and said, Mr. Constantine, Shirley said that she would come back, but it might be a few years later. She will really come back. Constantine suddenly raised his head and looked at Meg as if he had grabbed onto a life-saving straw. Meg nodded with a smile, and said, however, with the lifespan of elves, Shirley's appearance shouldn't change much no matter how many years pass. If Mr. Constantine continues to live in this state, I'm afraid the next time we meet will be at your funeral. Constantine looked at his pale and thin hands that were almost devoid of blood, and was stunned. During this period of time, he was immersed in sorrow and longing, and had given up on himself. He almost didn't pay attention to his own body. He didn't expect it to be so weak. No. Before Miss Shirley comes back, I have to stay healthy, and slow down my aging. I can't let myself age too quickly. Otherwise, Miss Shirley won't be able to recognize me. Constantine quickly made up his mind. He looked at Meg, and said, Mr. Meg, thank you. Even if it's just to see Miss Shirley again, and to tell her the words that I didn't have time to say back then, I will definitely live on well. After saying that, he strode into the restaurant and sat down at his familiar seat. I hope you can live on with determination when your confession fails. Meg shrugged, and continued to greet the next customer with a smile. The charging station for men, I'm here again. A man walked towards with light steps, and his eyes were full of passion. Vicenio had already experienced the saying of a newlywed who was like a wolf and a tiger. However, he didn't expect this newlywed period to last so long. His tigress was getting more and more ferocious, and almost squeezed him dry in bed every day. If it weren't for Am's 2 Ruggiamos providing him with motivation every day, he felt that he would have died in bed long ago. Vicenio made up his mind and quickened his pace. No, I'll have to eat another Ruggiamo to make up for it. Chapter 1134. Waiter, I'd like 3 Ruggiamos and a savory tofu pudding, Vesenio ordered as soon as he sat down. All right. Yabamiya nodded. Just then, a fragrant breeze wafted over, and a voluptuous woman sat beside Vesenio. She smiled and said, I'd like 3 Ruggiamos and a savory tofu pudding, too. Vesenio's mouth opened wide when he smelled the familiar fragrance, and he slowly turned around in disbelief. When he saw the woman sitting beside him and sizing him up with a smile, he jumped up from his chair like a mouse whose tail had been stepped on. He exclaimed, Honey. Why are you here? Everyone in the restaurant looked over. Loud noises were not allowed at Mamie's. Vesenio's skinny appearance was not much better than Constantine's. His face was pale, and he looked like he had kidney deficiency. On the other hand, the young woman sitting beside him had a rosy face, a voluptuous figure, and a charming face. Her eyes were full of gentleness. Honey, you scared me, the young woman said coquettishly as she patted her chest gently. Her breasts shook, and she had a shy look on her face. Who can withstand this? Many men swallowed their saliva subconsciously, and they didn't know whether to look at Vesenio with envy or pity. Vesenio quickly realized that he had overreacted. Thinking of Mamie's rules, he hurriedly sat down again, and apologized to Yabamiya, who was still standing at the side. He looked at Bonnie, and softly said, Honey, why are you here? Weren't you asleep? How can I sleep when you're gone? Bonnie clenched her small fist and punched Vesenio's shoulder as she said with an aggrieved expression, That's why I followed you out. When I saw you enter this restaurant, I was also hungry, so I followed you in. Why do you look so unhappy? Could it be that eating with me is something that makes you unhappy? How can that be? I saw that you were tired, so I didn't call you. Vesenio wanted to slap himself. He actually didn't realize that Bonnie was followed by Bonnie. No, you're the one who's tired. Bonnie took out a silk handkerchief from her chest and wiped Vesenio's forehead. Look, you're sweating. I just walked over. It's just a little sweat. Vesenio's voice was trembling. His wife was a tigress, not a shy kitten. She would only act like this in front of outsiders. If they were in bed, it would be a different story. Cough, cough. Mia, who was being fed dog food at the side, cleared her throat and interrupted the two of them. Both of you want 3 Ruggiamos and a savory tofu pudding each, right? Yes, I want the same as him. Bonnie smiled and nodded. She sized up Mia and praised, Miss, you're really beautiful. She then glanced at Vesenio from the corner of her eyes. Did this bastard come out to eat every day because of the beautiful waitresses in this restaurant? Vesenio could only pretend that he didn't understand Bonnie's gaze. He hurriedly interrupted, No, no. Honey, the Ruggiamos aren't delicious. They don't suit your taste. You can have the rainbow fried rice. That's beautiful and delicious. And the tofu pudding. You usually like to eat sweet things. Although I chose the savory side, the sweet tofu pudding might suit your taste better. Rainbow fried rice. Bonnie's eyes lit up when she heard that. The name of the dish sounded quite interesting. Could this restaurant really use beautiful rainbows to cook fried rice? But why did her own bastard stop her from eating Ruggiamos? A hint of suspicion appeared in Bonnie's eyes. Honey, hurry up and order. The other customers are still waiting. Vesenio felt a little guilty. He then directly said to Yabamiya, Give her a Yangzhou fried rice and a sweet tofu pudding. That's all. All right, please wait a moment. Yabamiya nodded and turned to walk to the next customer. Vesenio heaved a sigh of relief. The Ruggiamos were too strong. He could barely compete with Bonnie after eating them. If Bonnie also ate, he already couldn't imagine the possible outcome. Bonnie sized up the restaurant. The comfortable decorations and perfect partitions. She retracted her gaze and looked at Vicenio sadly. Honey, you really know how to choose a place. But why didn't you bring me to such an elegant restaurant in the past? You ate alone and didn't care about me at all. It's so sad. Vicenio's forehead was full of sweat as he nervously said, Actually, I also just found this restaurant. I was just about to try it. I'll bring you here next time. Uncle Week, don't you come here every day? Amy was passing by with Ugly Duckling in her arms when she suddenly stopped and asked with a strange expression. Little boss, you've misunderstood me. Vicenio's face darkened. He looked at Bonnie, whose smile was gradually becoming perverted, and stuttered as he explained, Honey. Listen to me, all right, you don't have to say any more. There's plenty of time when we go back, Bonnie said magnanimously. Vicenio sighed silently in his heart. He already knew what was going to happen when he went back today. Not long after, Yebamiya came over with a tray, and placed the food they had ordered in front of them. Your Rujiamos, Yangzhou fried rice, and tofu pudding. Vicenio quickly took the 3 Rujiamos and placed them next to his hand. Then, he placed the Yangzhou fried rice and sweet tofu pudding in front of Bonnie with a smile. Honey, here's your rainbow fried rice and sweet tofu pudding. I heard that your skin will become very good after eating this tofu pudding. Bonnie looked at Vicenio with a scrutinizing expression and said, I was wondering why you're becoming more and more tender. So, you've been eating these supplements behind my back every day. Are you planning to find another rich woman to keep you when I'm old? Although Vicenio was indeed a pretty boy who relied on his looks to make a living, he really didn't think that way. One Bonnie was already enough to make his legs go weak. How could he be in the mood to find another rich woman? He only ate the tofu pudding because it was really delicious. All right, I believe you. Bonnie stared at Vicenio for a while, and nodded without waiting for his explanation. Then, she picked up the spoon, scooped up a spoonful of the beautiful fried rice, and put it into her mouth. Oh! This is such a wonderful taste. Bonnie's face lit up with amazement after just chewing. The wonderful taste of all the ingredients bloomed in this mouth, and the more she chewed, the more fragrant it became. It really made her feel so blissful. After swallowing, she couldn't help but put another spoonful into her mouth. She couldn't help but indulge in the delicious taste. Vicenio heaved a sigh of relief when he saw the blissful smile on Bonnie's face. He also picked up the Rujiamo. The 2 layers of soft and fragrant Baiji bread sandwiched the tender braised meat. He bit into it, and the delicious gravy flowed out. Every taste bud on the tip of his tongue seemed to be cheering and jumping for joy. He closed his eyes and felt the blood in his body become violent, constantly repairing and filling up the holes in his body. It made him feel as if his empty body was gradually being filled up. Whispering in the pugilistic world. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.